Chapter 1968. When Hua Jin saw that she was finally smiling, his mood immediately brightened. In fact, he actually adored Yin Shi. But it was only adoration. Perhaps it was because, in the entertainment industry, to be able to meet such a pure woman was like a treasure. Yin Shi gave him a very warm feeling. When he was with her, even if she did not say a word, he still felt like he was being healed. Hence, he really enjoyed his time with her. However, he had never thought of taking such a beautiful woman for himself, because he felt that he was not worthy. In his heart, she was so beautiful and dazzling, while he was very lowly and dirty. From the beginning, he was struggling at death's door to where he was today. He had climbed up by hook or by crook. Looking back, those dirty scenes were something that even he could not bear to look at. Hence, he had arrogantly isolated himself from anyone who tried to get close to him. However, it was to protect himself from any harm. But he had never thought that one day he would have someone he wanted to protect wholeheartedly. Liking someone was really something that could not be grasped. It was often irreplaceable in a single thought. Hua Jin gazed at her side profile gently. For a moment, he was actually a little mesmerized. Suddenly, he said slowly, Sure, you're very beautiful when you smile. You're even more beautiful than roses. When Yin Shi heard this, her eyes curved like two crescent moons. Beside them, Qin Zhou could not help but feel goosebumps all over his body from Hua Jin's sweet words. He could not tell. This Hua Jin was really something. He was so good at coaxing girls that even he had to concede defeat. But thinking about it, it was to be expected. In his early years, Hua Jin was a famous boy in the bar. Hence, this kind of trick was naturally easy for him. When it came to pleasing girls, Hua Jin was extremely good at it. Any difficult woman would be won over in 1 or 2 moves in front of him. Yin Shi suddenly thought of something and deliberately said, But I don't like roses. They're too bright. Hua Jin asked, Then what kind of flowers do you like? Can you conjure whatever flowers I like for me? Hua Jin was silent. Magic was also dependent on props. It didn't mean that people who knew magic were like people who knew magic and could conjure whatever they wanted. Unless it was an experienced magician, he could basically conjure anything that he could think of, but he could not do that. Yin Shi did not know what he was thinking. She thought that his magic was very good, so she said, Turn this rose into a Chinese rose. For a moment, Hua Jin was awkward. Qin Zhou couldn't help but laugh. Sure, don't make things difficult for him. I think he's already very good if he could make this flower disappear. Hua Jin retorted matter-of-factly, What's so difficult about turning flowers into flowers? As he said this, he took the rose from Yin Shi's hand. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into thin air from his hand. Yin Shi, who was standing at the side, did not give up. Then where's my Chinese rose? Hua Jin looked at her innocently. Sure. Where did he go to conjure a Chinese rose? All right, I won't make things difficult for you. I know you can't do that. As Yin Shi said this, she spread out her hands and said, Then conjure another rose for me. Hua Jin was speechless. Could he say that the rose was already damaged? Chapter 1969. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the plane landed in Sea City. As it was winter, the weather was very cold at this time. When they walked out of the airport, they could clearly feel the cold. Coincidentally, Hua Jin and Yin Shi were staying at the same hotel. They put on their makeup and changed into their gowns in the hotel. Styling was always a big project. After an hour of styling, Yin Shi stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. She was beautiful, but not too glamorous. Everything was just right. When she arrived at the venue in the Bentley, the red carpet was full of people competing with each other for beauty. The atmosphere was at its climax. The wind outside was bitterly cold, but the female stars still braved the harsh weather in order to shine the brightest at the film festival. They wore dresses that exposed their shoulders or breasts, and kept posing coquettishly to get as much screen time as possible. The media reporters were already there. They were holding their cameras, and the camera lights were flashing nonstop. It was a lively scene. On the 100-meter red carpet, there were still many loyal fans who braved the cold weather and held their idols' nameplates to cheer for the celebrities. Of course, Most of them were fans hired by the celebrities to calm the crowd. The scene was very lively. However, Yin Shirshir could not lift her spirits no matter how hard she tried. The film festival that she had been looking forward to for a long time seemed to have lost its significance without Muyaja. In fact, the nervousness he had felt earlier had long disappeared. Qinzhou, on the other hand, was very nervous. It was not his first time walking the red carpet. In the past, when he was managing artists, he often walked the red carpet with them. Gu Xingze had walked the red carpet with him many times. When the two of them walked side by side, they usually attracted a lot of attention. However, it was different this time. Sure, let's get out of the car. Qinzhou got out of the car first, and then reached out to help her. Yin Shirshir lifted the hem of her dress and got out of the car elegantly. Then, she held his hand. Although she was not in a good mood, from the moment she got out of the car, she had to put on a smile and elegant posture in front of the camera. She wanted to show her best side to the camera. She took a deep breath and quickly put on a beautiful smile. She was very charming. Yin Shirshir and Qinzhou appeared at the end of the red carpet, quickly attracting attention. As for Qinzhou, he was a legendary figure in the entertainment industry. Although he was just a manager, he was more famous than many celebrities. He was the one who single-handedly made Gu Xingze famous. It could be said that half of Gu Xingze's 10 years of glory were created by him. He was a legendary figure. He kept a low profile behind the scenes, but he had created countless legends for Gu Xingze. Another reason was that although he was a manager, he was handsome and dashing. Even many of the popular young actors in the entertainment industry could not be compared to him. It was no surprise that Yin Shirshir and Qinzhou appeared together. As everyone knew, Yin Shirshir was the only artist under Qinzhou's management. It was expected that he would attend the film festival with his own artist. Speaking of which, Qinzhou felt that it was a pity. If the person standing next to Yin Shirshir at this moment was Mu Yaja, no one would dare to claim that they were the best at the film festival. As the male partner, Mu Yaja's presence and fame would crush anyone else at the film festival. But to everyone's surprise, he was absent. Chapter 1970. He could feel Yin Shirshir's disappointment. Even though she was smiling, the disappointment in her eyes was hard to hide. She smiled and waved at the enthusiastic fans and media reporters from time to time. She also answered the questions in an orderly manner during the interview. She did not leave out anything. After answering the questions, Qinzhou held her hand and walked into the main hall. Yin Shirshir appeared to be very low-key tonight. The other female celebrities could not wait to show off in front of the camera. Even if they were chased away by the host, they still shamelessly refused to leave the red carpet. However, as soon as she signed her name on the signature board, she hurriedly answered a few questions from the media and hurriedly walked into the venue. Everyone was puzzled. At this time, she should be fighting for the camera and the limelight. Why did she want everyone to not pay attention to her? Strange. After Yin Shirshir and Qinzhou entered the hall, they sat down. Qinzhou had his own seat, but he was worried about Yin Shirshir, so he sat in Mu Yaja's seat. There were many popular actresses sitting in the same row as her. They were all famous actresses in the industry. They were all seated first. When they walked over, they were surprised to see Mu Yaja's name on the name tag beside Yin Shirshir's seat. Mu Yaja? Isn't that the young master of Mu Group? Will he be attending the film festival tonight? I don't think so. He is famous for being low-key. Even though he is the big boss of Huanyu, he rarely appears in public. In the past, there were reporters who secretly took photos of him, but they were mercilessly banned by him. Why would he attend such an event? But the name on the name tag can't be wrong. It is right beside Yin Shirshir. Don't tell me. He came with Yin Shirshir? Everyone was whispering and curious. If they could sit in the same row as a big shot like Mu Yaja, it would be encouraging. Being able to come into close contact with this legendary business king was something that many people didn't even dare to dream of. However, when Yin Shirshir and Qinzhou sat down, everyone was disappointed. It seemed that the organizers had really made a big mistake. The name tag was printed wrong. Thinking about it, it was inevitable. Why would someone like Mu Yaja attend such a small film festival? Although the Golden Eagle Film Festival was the most influential film festival in the country, it was especially grand every year. However, Muyaja had never made an exception. Not long after Yin Shishir sat down, Han Yin also entered the venue. As the last guest, she wore Louis Vuitton's new winter gown. Coupled with her extremely sexy style and rich and exquisite makeup, she quickly became the highlight of the entire venue. Yin Shishir also glanced at her. It was just a glance, but she was also stunned. In all fairness, she was really beautiful. Apart from her beauty, she also had the temperament of a queen. Different from Yin Shishir's gentle temperament, Han Yuyin had been in the entertainment industry for many years. Her status was firm, and she had won many awards and nominations at international film festivals. With her excellent acting skills, she was also a magnet for box office sales. With so many honors, she had cultivated the demeanor of a queen and radiated radiance. It could be said that the most famous A-list actress in the entertainment industry was none other than Han Yuyin. Chapter 1971. After she sat down, she tilted her head and glanced at Yin Shishir. Then, she sneered and looked straight ahead, as if she didn't care about her at all. "She's so pretty, like a proud peacock." Yin Shishir praised her sincerely. Qin Zhou sneered. "Pretty? Don't be fooled by her appearance. A basin of makeup remover, an old woman from the countryside. If you put on that kind of makeup, how can she compare to you?" Yin Shishir was at a loss for words. Han Yuyin's ears were very sharp, so she heard what Qin Zhou said. Or maybe Qin Zhou didn't deliberately avoid her. Maybe he said it for her to hear. When Han Yuyin heard it, she was furious. This Qin Zhou was so sharp-tongued. How could she have any face left? But Qin Zhou's status was too high. No matter how famous she was, she didn't dare to be his enemy. Han Yuyin clenched her fists so tightly that her sharp nails almost dug into her palms. She barely managed to maintain her composure and not let her anger explode. She smiled elegantly, as if she didn't hear it. She looked straight ahead like a proud queen. After a long warm-up, the ceremony officially started at 8 o'clock in the evening. This time, the MCs were Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian. According to Qin Zhou, the original MCs of the film festival were Gu Xingze and Han Yuyin. However, after Gu Xingze was banned, the MC list was changed. Huan Yu had been promoting Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian recently. The two of them starred in a TV series together, and it was at a time when the ratings were hot. Most of the ceremonies of the film festival were a combination of handsome men and beautiful women. Of course, there were a few occasions when there were two male actors. However, although the MCs this time were good-looking, they didn't seem to be important enough. This time, the lineup of the film festival was very strong. Even Han Yuyin was there. Yang Mi's fame was still okay, but Li Jiuxian's fame seemed to have faded a little. After the two of them appeared, the audience erupted into cheers. Yang Mi smiled. "It's my honor to appear on this stage as the MC of the film festival today. Facing so many seniors below the stage, I'm actually quite nervous. This is my first time hosting the Golden Eagle Film Festival. As a host, I'm still a newbie and I'm still lacking a lot. Although my hosting skills may not be at a high level, allow me to express my respect and seriousness for the Golden Eagle Film Festival." Yang Jian covered his chest and bowed. Another round of applause came from the audience. Then, Li Jiuxian also gave a congratulatory speech for the film festival. With just a few words, the atmosphere at the scene was lifted. The opening of a film festival was usually very boring. First, the VIPs would be invited to give an important speech. Then, after a round of performances, the awards would be announced. The first round of awards was for the Best Director of the Year and the Best Movie of the Year. First, it was Best Director. The screen first showed the list of nominees and the video clips of the representative works. Unsurprisingly, Lin Fengtian was nominated. The shortlist was generated through a long process of online voting. It was fair and just. There were a total of 10 people on the shortlist. Finally, after a competition, the final prize was awarded. Lin Fengtian's votes had been maintained at a very high level. The box office sales of The Green Apple and its strong reputation made him a strong candidate for the Best Director award. Yin Shishir finally felt a little nervous. Chapter 1972. Before this, she had paid special attention to the list of nominees. The competition was very strong. If Lin Fengtian wanted to win the award, he still needed to have some ability. Of course, ability was needed, but so was background. Yin Shishir hoped that Lin Fengtian would win the award. It was not out of selfishness, but in her eyes, Lin Fengtian had the ability. Although Lin Fengtian did not need a trophy to prove himself, Yin Shishir felt that in the future, there seemed to be no one on the list of directors who could compare to Lin Fengtian's influence and professionalism. The guest presenter for the Best Director Award was the most famous veteran actor in the film industry, Chen Haimin. The veteran actor was over 50 years old and was no longer young. Last year, he had suffered from cancer. After 6 months of fighting against it, he finally defeated the disease. After returning to the film industry, he took on a few films and received good reviews. Although he was old, when he stood on the stage in a well-ironed Chinese tunic suit with his signature smile, he still looked energetic. As soon as he spoke, the audience burst into thunderous applause. I have been away from the stage for 3 years. Now that I am standing at this award ceremony, it is as if I have returned home. Dear relatives sitting below the stage, please allow me the honor to present this sacred and solemn award. The applause rose again. In the film industry, the director is the leader of film and television works. It is like the highest commander in the army. The victory or defeat of the team depends on his leadership ability. After 100 years of settling down, there have been many outstanding directors in the domestic film industry. However, I believe that a director's excellence is not solely determined by the box office. Quality and cultivation, as well as a respectful attitude toward the film industry, are also important factors to consider. It is my honor to receive the award today. The director of this award is also one of the best directors in my heart. I am fortunate to have worked with him for 1 or 2 films. The most unforgettable thing is his extremely professional attitude. Everyone should have guessed who the person I am talking about is. Chen Haimin smiled as he looked at the cue cards and swept his gaze across the audience. The audience was in an uproar. Through Chen Haimin's revelation, they could roughly guess who it was. Lin Fengtian, who was sitting in the first row, suddenly smiled. Yin Shishir held Qin Zhou's hand nervously. I think Director Lin has a chance. Qin Zhou couldn't help but tease. It's not like you're the one who won the award. Why are you so excited? Director Lin's trophy is much more important than mine. How can I not be excited? Just as she was feeling nervous, Chen Haimin's deep voice came from the stage. The winner of this year's Best Director Award is Lin Fengtian. His representative work, The Green Apple. Amidst the thunderous applause, Lin Fengtian stood up from his seat and slowly walked to the front of the stage under everyone's gaze. Chen Haimin hugged him and gave him the trophy. Then, he gave him the microphone. It was his home court now. Lin Fengtian stood in front of the microphone and gently raised the trophy in his hand with a smile. I'm honored. I'm truly honored. I am able to obtain this trophy under the witness of all my friends. The trophy is heavy and represents the audience's recognition and love for me. I feel very honored. Chapter 1973. I've been in this industry for more than 10 years. From the beginning as a cameraman, to the release of female films everywhere, to the current The Green Apple that finally broke the Chinese box office record. I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. I was afraid that I wouldn't be recognized by the audience. But thank you to everyone who fought with me. This year I did it. To me, The Green Apple isn't just a youth film. It's a step in my career as a director. This is a milestone. Also, I have to thank the big family and the production team for letting me feel the joy and happiness of growing up. This trophy doesn't just belong to me, it also belongs to all of you. Thank you. Yin Shishir smiled and applauded. Lin Fengtian deserved the Best Director Award. Li Jiuxian smiled and said, Director Lin, this trophy carries a lot of weight, but it's also well-deserved. All my glory also belongs to the unknown behind-the-scenes crew. They are all heroes. Thank you. On the stage, Lin Fengtian was humble and polite. It was hard to imagine that this man was the devil director who had scolded all the main actors on the set. After Lin Fengtian left the stage, the awards were announced one after another. The Green Apple was nominated for many awards. Other than the Best Director Award, there are also Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Film of the Year. Most popular celebrity, of course, being nominated didn't mean that one would win the award. Gu Xingze, who was expected to win the Best Actor award, actually missed out on the Best Actor award. In the end, the trophy actually fell into his hands. Gu Xingze had always been popular. Popularity, acting skills, quality. No matter which one it was impeccable. But why could it be because he was banned? Yun Shirshir pursed her lips in disappointment. Qin Zhou glanced at her and quickly understood why she was disappointed. He immediately said, "Don't be sad. Xingze didn't win the award because he's not capable enough. Don't be fooled by the low level of the film market in the second half of the year. There are many cases of bad actors making up the numbers. But there are still many good works in the first half of the year, like Mekong River Tragedy, Flying Sword of Snow Mountain, City of Pain. There are many outstanding works. There are many people. But Xingze's acting isn't worse than theirs." Yin Shirshir was obviously unconvinced. Qin Zhou explained, "But youth films have always been at a disadvantage in the competition for such awards. It couldn't be compared to those films that had a profound meaning. So, it was expected that they wouldn't win the Best Actor award. Calm down a little." Yin Shirshir nodded slowly. At the side, Han Yuyin suddenly sneered. "Do you think you'll definitely win the award just because you've been nominated? It's just acting in a youth film. Can you act out a sense of superiority? A youth film like The Green Apple may be able to fool students, but it's an elegant and refined place. Yin Shirshir, I don't think you should have any expectations. You won't get any awards anyway. At most, I'll give you the Best Newcomer award for fun." Yin Shirshir turned around expressionlessly. She glanced at her and smiled gracefully. "It seems that I have a bad memory. For someone like movie Queen Han, who came from a prestigious background, she probably wouldn't care about such inferior works like youth films. However, if I remember correctly, your Virgo is Lin." Chapter 1974. Yin Shirshir's words left Han Yuyin speechless and speechless. She could only glare at her angrily. What a sharp-tongued B*TCH. How dare she bicker with her? Who does she think she is? Yin Shirshir glanced at Han Yuyin's sinister but fake smile and laughed mercilessly. "You said I acted in a teen film to show off my sense of superiority. Interesting. But what about you, Best Actress Han? You've gone overseas for gold plating, and you're already a 36. Ninth grade? Haha, impressive. You." Han Yuyin was so agitated that her face turned red. No matter how thick the foundation was, it was still difficult to hide the redness on her face from her extreme anger. She had indeed debuted because of Bamboo Dragonfly, and had received many good resources because of this film. However, she had always looked down on teen films. Therefore, after she became famous, she took on many artistic films. Although they were good, but not very popular, they had accumulated sufficient reputation. Of course, there were some controversial films, such as Butterfly. In the film, she played a prostitute who underwent special training to become a female spy in the intelligence agency. Her life was full of ups and downs. Because the plot was sensitive, it was not released in the country. Many people on the internet scolded her for being a traitor. However, this film had successfully opened up international resources for her, and with her outstanding performance in this film, she had entered the Hollywood market. Although there was a lot of criticism in the country, Han Yuyin later did charity work and promoted charity work, washing away her unglamorous image. Yin Shirshir especially despised people like her. In her heart, no matter what kind of film it was, as long as it won the approval and love of the audience and was not a shoddy production, it had its own value. The Green Apple was an excellent film in her heart, and she would not allow anyone to tarnish it. Moreover, Han Yuyin could be said to have been made famous by Lin Fengtian. Now, she had turned around and insulted her mentor's work. It was really infuriating. Qin Zhou was shocked that Yin Shirshir dared to retort. At the same time, he was annoyed by Han Yuyin's deliberate provocation. "Han Yuyin, you seem to be very talkative. If you can't keep your mouth shut, I don't mind sewing it up for you." Qin Zhou's words were much more forceful. Hearing this, Han Yuyin snorted coldly and turned her head away, not daring to say anything else. However, The resentment in his heart towards Yun Shirshir was becoming more and more extreme. Before Yun Shirshir, Lin Fengtian had also worked with many female celebrities. Lin Fengtian was different from other directors. In order to guarantee the box office, most of the other directors would offer a high price of tens of millions to use A-list young actresses. Shadow media didn't need much publicity to have enough influence. But Lin Fengtian was not. The amount of money he offered depended on the performance of the actor. He would rather spend tens of millions on the post-production of the film, as well as the filming budget. When it came to casting, he still preferred to use newcomers most of the time. Firstly, newcomers were very easy to sculpt. Although they were not famous, they were just a blank piece of paper, so he could sculpt them however he wanted. Secondly, newcomers knew how to cherish opportunities that were hard to come by. They were humble and polite, and many newcomers were even more outstanding than those popular starlets. For example, Yin Shirshir's acting skills were much better than many other starlets. Chapter 1975. However, before Yin Shirshir, there had never been another Phoenix girl who could compare with Han Yuyin in terms of popularity. Until Yin Shirshir appeared. She came with a vengeance and was exposed overnight. Her popularity was even greater than Han Yuyin's. Of course, Han Yuyin was unhappy. No one wanted to be outshone by anyone else. With Yin Shirshir, many people secretly laughed and said that Yin Shirshir would be the second Han Yuyin in the future. Han Yuyin was old and no longer young. Her popularity was probably over. Han Yuyin was almost driven mad by these comments. Yin Shirshir, why are you paying attention to her? She's almost a has-been, and she's jealous of you. Qin Zhou laughed. Jealous? How can I not be jealous? You can still act as a middle school student. At her age, she can only act as a student's mother. Qin Zhou's mouth was indeed the sharpest. Han Yuyin trembled with anger when she heard this. When she heard Qin Zhou's words, she instinctively touched her face. Although she paid a lot of attention to her skincare, she was still young. In this industry, one had to rely on one's youth to survive. Youth was the only way to rise to the top. In other words, her acting skills were not as good as Yun Shirshir's. In the future, she could only rely on her past. If she could not find a good director and a good script, she would not have any prospects. In addition, her overworked filming career had caused her endocrine system to be disrupted. Her skin was very bad. Indeed, in a movie like The Green Apple, she could only act as Yun Shirshir's mother. This was too much. How could she make fun of her like this? If Han Yuyin was not waiting for the award ceremony, and she could not leave as the guest presenter, she would have left her seat in a fit of anger. Yin Shirshir could not stop laughing. You're exaggerating. She may look good now, but once she removes her makeup, she looks like an old witch. Yin Shirshir stuck out her tongue. Han Yuyin's face was tense. She glared at Yin Shirshir, but could not do anything because of Qin Zhou's presence. She could only suppress her anger and clench her teeth. The awards ceremony continued. There were male and female Best Newcomer awards, but they were both on stage to receive their awards. As the guest presenter for the Best Newcomer award, Han Yuyin gracefully stepped onto the stage. Yin Shirshir's heart skipped a beat when she saw that the award was given by her. Why is she presenting the award? It was set by the organizers. Looks like you can't run away from the Best Newcomer award. Why do you say that? Yin Shirshir was a little confused. Could it be that this award was decided internally? For a live broadcast like a film festival, the ceremony process must be very boring. So, a certain gimmick is needed to promote it. Since Han Yuyin is the guest presenter as the Phoenix Maiden, the two of you are the same. When he appeared on the stage, it was bound to attract a lot of controversy and comparisons. This is what the organizers are happy to see. Qin Zhou's analysis was very organized and logical. Yin Shirshir understood it very well. The Best Newcomer Award was the only award where the entire process of voting was conducted online. It was absolutely open, fair, and just. Chapter 1976. During the final voting process, the final list of winners would be kept a secret until it was announced on the spot during the award ceremony. The votes of the winners would also be announced. All of this was done by the notary office. Therefore, the Best Newcomer Award could be said to be the only award that was not overstated. There were a total of 10 nominees for the Best Newcomer Award. Yin Shirshir carefully studied the list of nominees. Until the voting channel closed, she was still in first place. The effect of the green apple was unprecedented. On the huge screen, clips of the nominated actors' representative works were shown. Among them, when it came to Yin Shirshir's The Green Apple, the editing of the film made many people excited and applauded thunderously. Yin Shirshir was shocked by this scene. Are these people the internet water army? How was that possible? Aren't they too supportive? Yin Shirshir was still in disbelief. Qin chuckled. Little girl, don't you know how many uncles in the industry fell in love with your role as Yin Xiaochuan? Otherwise, do you think that praises for your excellence are just words of comfort? You have indeed performed well. Yin Shirshir smiled awkwardly. Han Yin stood on the stage and glanced elegantly at the cue card in her hand. She smiled at the microphone and announced, the final winners of the 19th Golden Eagle Awards for Best Newcomer Award are... Everyone held their breaths and was silent. Yin Shirshir, Hua Jin, congratulations. Sure enough, it was just as Qin Zhou had predicted. She really won the Best Newcomer Award. Thunderous applause rang from below the stage. Yin Shirshir had won the Newcomer Award, which was widely expected of her. After the announcement of the award, the camera quickly switched to Yin Shirshir. Yin Shirshir smiled at the crowd. Even though she had won the Newcomer Award, her face was calm and collected. Naturally, she did not show much surprise and appeared extremely calm. Everyone was shocked. It was not easy for a newcomer to face the award with such a calm attitude. Qin Zhou clapped and looked at her gently. Go on stage to receive the award. Watch your expression. Don't be too nervous. Okay. Yin Shirshir stood up slowly. As the winner of the Best Newcomer Award, Hua Jin walked in front of her like a gentleman. He kissed the back of her hand gently and held her hand as they walked onto the stage together. Han Yuyin smiled as she watched her walk onto the stage. Although she looked natural and unrestrained on the surface, what about her heart? However, he was already gnashing his teeth in hatred. Yin Shirshir walked up to the stage and stood beside Hua Jin. Her bearing was elegant and proper, and she exuded a quiet and elegant aura. This elegant temperament was not something that was painstakingly trained. There was a type of person who was born noble and elegant, and it was incomparable. Han Yuyin stood at the side. Even though she had put in a lot of effort in dressing up and makeup on her face, she still managed to steal a lot of the limelight. Even her aura was suppressed by Yin Shirshir's. Her starlight was bleak. On the surface, Han Yuyin maintained her composure, but her heart was in turmoil. Yin Shirshir was touched when she received the heavy trophy from Han Yuyin. This was the first trophy she had won in her acting career. It was very memorable. Even though she already had a lot of mental preparation for this trophy, when she stood on the stage and held the trophy in her hands, the pride that welled up spontaneously rose. Chapter 1977. Congratulations, Shirshir. You really deserve the Best Newcomer Award. Thank you. Han Yuyin lowered her head and looked at her. She was wearing a pair of 10-centimeter high heels today, so she looked very domineering. She lowered her head and leaned closer to Han Yuyin's ear. In the eyes of others, this might be a senior congratulating and blessing a junior. However, once Han Yuyin stepped away from the microphone, she smiled and squeezed out a few aggressive words. Yin Shirshir, don't be too proud. If you fly too high, you might fall and shatter into pieces. Yin Shirshir looked up and met her sharp gaze for a short moment. Han Yuyin was just a multi-award nominated Best Actress. She had good acting skills and a smile on her face, but she said such vicious words to her. Yin Shirshir was not to be outdone. She stared at Han Yuyin's face and retorted with a smile. Miss Han, don't be too jealous of me. Do you know what's the first thing I'll do when I fly to a certain height? What? Han Yuyin raised her eyebrows, puzzled. Yin Shirshir smiled, and the curve of her lips became gentler. I'll step on you. The concierge reminded her softly. Miss Han, it's time to give the award to Mr. Hua. Han Yuyin came back to her senses and gave the other award to Hua Jin. However, she looked at Yin Shirshir meaningfully. It was Yin Shirshir's turn to give her speech. Yin Shirshir raised the award and held the microphone. Actually, I never thought that I'd be able to win this award. As a newcomer, I've been trembling with fear all along. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough, that I'm not good enough. However, after the movie was released, it gave me too many surprises. The support of the director, the care of the seniors, and the recognition of the fans. One thing I'm sure of is that without all of you, I wouldn't be standing on this stage right now. When she went down the stage, Chin-jo asked, "What did Han Yu-yin say to you just now?" "Congratulations from the seniors." Chin-jo didn't believe her. He didn't even need to think about it. Han Yu-yin wouldn't say anything nice. There's no need to be so calculative with her. Yin Shishir was very open-minded and didn't take it to heart. Yin Shishir had been mentally prepared, but now that she was holding the heavy award in her hand, her heartbeat quickened. She was happy. At this moment, she suddenly felt that all her efforts might be worth it. She was lucky. The Best Newcomer Award was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for an actor, regardless of everything. It was an honor that no amount of awards could exchange for. Of course, she was honored. If she didn't get it, it would be a regret. She was very open-minded when it came to awards. If she didn't win, she would smile and encourage her. However, without the witness of that person, this moment of glory seemed to have lost its profound meaning. At the end of the award ceremony, most of the awards had been announced. Many celebrities had already left the venue. Alas, she insisted on sitting until the end. After all, this was a respectful attitude toward the movie. Chin-jo became more and more certain. A person who knew how to respect others, at least in terms of character and accomplishment, was worthy of recognition. The Green Apple was a big success. Apart from the Best Screenplay, Best Director, and Most Popular Film of the Year, it also won the Best Newcomer and Best Editing Awards. Chapter 1978. Although The Green Apple was excellent, there were many other works that deserved recognition. There was also a small incident in the middle. Actually, the Best Actress of the film festival had already been decided internally. With the Moo Group's strong investment, he had made an irreversible condition back then. The Best Actress award for this year's Golden Eagle Awards must go to Yin Shishir and no one else. Hence, Yin Shishir could have won the Best Actress of the film festival. Unfortunately, there was a conflict among the judges. Muyaja was not present at the event. Hence, when the organizers saw that the Moo Group's highest authority was not present, they had selfish motives. In the end, the voting process was skewed, and another investor used underhanded means to take away the original Yin. Shishir's Best Actress award was given to Lin Ji. Yin Shishir only found out about this from Chin-jo after she returned to the hotel. Chin-jo only found out about it after the awards ceremony ended. He was furious. No wonder there seemed to be a conflict at the judges' table when they were giving out this award. A few of the judges were arguing about something with ashen faces. They were playing tricks and manipulating the situation behind the scenes. They had actually stolen Yin Shishir's Best Actress award. If not for this interlude, the title of Best Actress would eventually fall to Yin Shishir. This would be a historic moment for the Golden Eagle Awards. If she could win both the Best Newcomer Award and Best Actress Award at the same time, it would be a great honor for Yin Shishir. She would be the youngest actress to win both the Best Newcomer Award and Best Actress Award at the Golden Eagle Film Festival. For a young newcomer, this was an enviable honor. However, due to various reasons, it could only be a pity. Chin-jo did not inform Yin Shishir on the way. He was afraid that she would feel disappointed and depressed. However, Yin Shishir did not feel that disappointed. Lin Ji's team had manipulated the situation behind the scenes, and so had Muyaja. Compared to his absence from the film festival, everything else seemed less important. She said to Chin-jo, "Don't worry, I'm not that weak. I'm already very happy to win the Best Newcomer Award." Chin-jo exclaimed, "Your psychological endurance is really strong. If it were any other female artist, they would probably be crying under their blankets right now. One shouldn't be too greedy. One must know how to be content." Chin-jo nodded and reminded her, "It's getting late. Have a good rest. We'll return to the capital tomorrow morning." "Yes." Yin Shishir returned to the empty room and gently placed the trophy on the table. She stared at it for a while, then got up and went to the shower to wash up. After washing up, she went to bed early. Her mood was a little messy, so she lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. When he closed his eyes, the whole world was noisy. In the middle of the night, just as she was about to fall asleep, her phone screen suddenly lit up. It was a message. Yin Shishir unlocked the phone and saw that it was from Qinzhou. "I'll wait for you on the rooftop." It was a simple sentence with 6 words, concise and clear. Tiantai. There was a rooftop in this hotel, but it was on the 28th floor. Why did Qinzhou ask her to go to the rooftop? It was the middle of the night. Wasn't he going to sleep? Yin Shishir called back, but she could not get through. That was strange. Chapter 1979. She made a few calls, but none of them went through. Was it because the hotel signal was not good? That was strange. Qinzhou's phone was always connected, and the signal was excellent. Sometimes, he could receive her phone even when there was no signal. Yin Shishir dialed more than 10 times, but there was still no response. She frowned, stood up, and changed her clothes. The night was cold, so she put on a jacket, opened the door, and walked out. She seemed to remember which room Qinzhou was in. 1502. She was on the 14th floor, and Qinzhou was on the 15th floor. He mentioned a room number to her and said that she could knock on the door if there was anything. But she did not pay attention at that time, so she did not remember Qinzhou's room number. For a moment, she was annoyed and could only search based on her vague memory. When the elevator reached the 15th floor, she walked to the door of 1502 and gently pressed the doorbell. Ding dong. He called out several times, but no one answered. Yin Shishir frowned in confusion. Was it not 1502? Just as she was about to leave, she heard the sound of the door unlocking behind her. Yin Shishir turned around in surprise, only to see Huajin standing at the door with a tired expression. He asked in an unfriendly tone, "Who is it, Before he could finish his sentence, Huajin saw Yin Shishir standing at the door. Surprise flashed across his eyes, and then the coldness in his eyes faded, and a smile appeared on his face. "Shishir, are you looking for me?" Huajin was wearing a bathrobe. His hair was a little wet, and it fell messily above his eyebrows. His charming peach blossom eyes were slightly bright because of the surprise in them. Yin Shishir's gaze could not help but fall on him. Huajin's bathrobe made him look tall and slender, but his chest was slightly exposed, revealing his defined muscles. He looked extremely sexy. Usually, when she saw him the most, he was wearing slim-fit ancient clothes. Hence, he looked like a slender and delicate handsome man in ancient times who could not even hold his waist. However, she did not expect that he was also a man who looked thin in clothes, but was muscular when he took them off. He was very stylish. Huajin sensed her gaze and followed her gaze. He looked down his chest and smiled faintly. He shyly straightened his clothes, and the corners of his lips curled into a playful smile. "Does it look good?" Yin Shishir blushed. She turned around and cleared her throat. "I didn't see anything." "Yes, I know." The smile in Huajin's eyes deepened, but he didn't expose her excuse. Yin Shishir also sensed his kind protection and instantly felt embarrassed. She turned around abruptly and wanted to leave. Huajin stopped smiling and asked nervously, "Where are you going?" "I'm going back to my room." "Aren't you looking for me?" Huajin stopped her. "What's the matter?" Yin Shishir turned around and immediately explained, "No, I got the wrong room. I thought Qinzhou stayed in this room." Huajin was stunned, and his eyes were filled with loneliness. He quickly understood that she had knocked on the door because she thought Qinzhou stayed in this room and remembered the wrong room number. He was disappointed. He had thought that she was looking for him, but he did not expect that it was just his wishful thinking. "So, you're looking for Qinzhou and not me?" "Yes." Chapter 1980. Yin Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why would I look for you in the middle of the night? You can look for me even if you don't have anything to do." Huajin said matter-of-factly, "There are a lot of things you can do." Yin Shishir raised her eyebrows and stared at him suspiciously. Huajin felt that there was a lot of unfathomable meaning in that pair of eyes. Afraid that she would think too much, he immediately retorted like a gentleman. "For example, we can chat or play cards. Let's play Fight the Landlord together." Yin Shishir shook her head and laughed. I'm not good at cards, and I'm only average at Fight the Landlord. I'm destined to lose money. If you're not good enough, I can go easy on you." Hua Jin smiled, but he seemed very generous. Yin sure teased, "You're so rich. Mahjong is fine too. I don't know how to play Mahjong." Hua Jin was stunned. "Then what do you know?" Yin sure couldn't be bothered with him. She had wasted a lot of time coming and going. She was still anxious to find Qin Zhou. So she said, I'm not telling you. If you're bored and can't sleep, don't drag me along. After I find Qin Zhou, I'll go back to my room to rest. I have a flight tomorrow morning." Sure. Wait a minute." Hua Jin saw that she was about to turn and leave, so he quickly stopped her. "What?" Yin sure looked at him warily, not knowing what he wanted to do. "You don't know Qin Zhou's room number, right?" "Yeah. Why?" "I can help you ask." 5 minutes later, Yin sure sat uneasily in Hua Jin's room and looked around. The luxurious suite Hua Jin was in was twice as big as her suite. Most importantly, it had a sky garden. Standing on the balcony and looking out at the city, the scenery was beautiful. Especially, looking from afar, it was as if she was in the vast starry sky. Hua Jin sat in front of the bedside table with one hand holding the phone. Seeing her look at the garden and balcony, he couldn't help but laugh. "Do you like it?" "Yes, I do." Yin sure praised from the bottom of her heart. "It's very beautiful. Such a suite is really too luxurious. Garden suite. You can enjoy the night view, and it's very quiet." Hua Jin dialed the number at the front desk and said with a smile, "If you like, you can stay here tonight." Yin sure threw a pillow at her. "Shut up. Are you trying to play row with me?" I wouldn't dare. "Ouch, it hurts." Hua Jin covered his nose and begged for mercy. While the two of them were fooling around, the phone at the front desk was connected. Hua Jin immediately asked, "Hello, I would like to ask for the room number of a guest." Yin sure, who was standing at the side, came to a sudden realization. She was still wondering why Hua Jin called the front desk. It turned out that he could check the room number. Stupid. Why didn't she think of that? His brain was really slow. However, Hua Jin suddenly frowned, and his expression became strange. "What do you mean? The system has been hacked?" "Yeah, just now. The server at the front desk was hacked, and the system went black. The technical department is already doing emergency maintenance. It happened so suddenly, and I'm really sorry. We have already registered your request. However, due to the system crash, I'm afraid we won't be able to find the information you want for the time being." The front desk kept apologizing, obviously feeling guilty. Hua Jin put down the phone. Yin sure immediately asked, "How was it?" Chapter 1981. Yin sure frowned. She felt that something was amiss. She only regretted that she didn't remember Qin Zhou's room number when he told her about it. The screen of her phone flashed again. She looked down and saw that she had received a text message. Sure, I have something to talk to you about. I'll be waiting for you on the rooftop." Yin sure suddenly stood up. Hua Jin also stood up nervously. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to look for Qin Zhou. He said he'll be waiting for me on the rooftop." Asking a girl to go to the rooftop in the middle of the night. No matter how he thought about it, it felt a little strange. "I'll go with you." Hua Jin was obviously worried, so he suggested. Yin sure shook her head and said, "No need. Maybe he's in a bad mood and drinking alone on the rooftop. He wants me to go over and talk to him for a while." Okay. Hua Jin nodded hesitantly. Then, he looked at her worriedly. "Be careful then. It's cold on the rooftop. Don't catch a cold." "Thank you." Hua Jin's sincere concern warmed Yin shure's heart. She then left the room and walked up the staircase. There was no direct elevator to the rooftop. She needed to reach the top floor and then walk up the stairs. The highest floor of the hotel was the 27th floor. The radio station was at the top, 28th floor. It was very high. After reaching the 27th floor, she turned a corner and walked through a long corridor. Then, she saw the stairs that led to the rooftop. She put her phone in her pocket and slowly picked up the stairs to walk up. Amidst the palpitating silence, her footsteps were crisp and powerful. When they collided with the marble table, they knocked on her heart. However, she felt oppressed. The corridor was too quiet. Perhaps because this floor was rarely visited by people, the lights in the corridor flickered because they had not been repaired for many years. Just like in horror movies, she felt that there was a pair of eyes filled with hatred staring at her from the dark corner behind her. It stared at her back as if it wanted to pierce through her body. Yin Shishir's heart was beating like a drum. The staircase leading to the rooftop was so long. In the dim light, she didn't walk fast. However, in the deathly silence, the uneasiness and fear made her flustered. However, gradually, she began to have a very strong sixth sense. It didn't seem to be an illusion. She really felt that there was a pair of eyes silently staring at her from behind, like a ferocious beast aiming at its prey. This feeling was very strong. Wishful thinking. How could this be possible? Even so, she was still frightened by her own imagination and broke out in a cold sweat. However, she did not dare to turn around to see what was going on. It was as if the moment she turned around, that person would pounce on her. Yin Shishir could not help but feel a little regretful. He didn't know why she was trying to be brave. Just now, Huajin had said that he wanted to accompany her. Why did she reject him? She was obviously very scared. She didn't dare to walk slowly anymore. In a spurt of energy, she ran crazily to the rooftop. She pushed open the slightly open door. However, what welcomed her was the biting cold wind of the rooftop and the seemingly endless starry sky. The rooftop of the hotel was very big. At the same time, the hotel's water tank was also installed on the rooftop. Seeing the huge water tank, Yin Shishir was in a daze. She suddenly remembered a piece of news from before. Chapter 1982. She couldn't help but shudder at the thought. When people were in extreme fear, it was easy for their imagination to run wild. Reality had proven that one's imagination was far scarier than reality. Yin Shishir calmed down and looked around. However, she didn't see anyone on the huge rooftop. Qinzhou wasn't around. He wasn't around. Yin Shishir glanced at her cell phone suspiciously. She swiped the screen to unlock it and took another look at Qinzhou's message. She thought that she had seen wrongly, but she wasn't wrong. He did ask her to meet on the rooftop. Yin Shishir was a little angry. She didn't know what Qinzhou was up to. Didn't he say that he had something to talk to her about? She had agreed to meet him on the rooftop. Where was he? Could it be a prank? Yin Shishir was a little suspicious. She thought of Qinzhou's usual black-bellied appearance. He seemed to like to tease people and took pleasure in it. He usually spoke frivolously. It seemed that he was deliberately making fun of her. Yin Shishir was even angrier at the thought of this. She was even angrier at herself. She actually believed Qinzhou's prank. She even thought that this frivolous fellow had something important to talk to her about. It seemed that she had been overthinking. Yin Shishir was angry. She turned around and wanted to leave. However, she was mesmerized by the night view in front of her. As a developed city, Sea City was famous for its seaside scenery. This hotel wasn't far from the seaside. Although it was a short drive, standing on the 28th floor of the hotel, one could overlook the city's night view. At the same time, one could also see the endless sea in the distance. The sky and the water merged into one. It was impossible to distinguish the coast, and the end of the sea could not be seen. Yin Shishir originally thought that the best time to appreciate the sea view was probably when the sun was shining brightly. However, she didn't expect the sea view at night to be so beautiful and mesmerizing. The rows of landscape lights by the seaside reflected each other. From afar, it looked like starlight. At first glance, it looked like a vast starry sky. The stars and moon in the sky were reflected on the surface of the sea. The sparkling waves added a touch of poetry to the scene. Yin Shishir casually picked up her phone and pondered. She wanted to capture this beautiful scene. He turned on the camera, but what popped out was a selfie. Many camera apps were targeted at people who liked to take selfies. Therefore, the first thing that popped up was the front-facing camera. Her face was suddenly reflected in the selfie. She was startled and immediately wanted to switch the camera. However, just as her fingertips touched the switch function, she suddenly realized that there was someone standing behind her. While she was still in shock, the camera had already switched to the rear camera. However, in the shot just now, there was clearly someone standing behind her. A woman with disheveled hair and wearing a hospital gown. Yin Shishir broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking that she was hallucinating, she slowly turned around, only to be horrified to find a woman with disheveled hair standing behind her at some point. This scene was so frightening that her hand trembled, and the phone fell to the ground with a paw sound. She was so frightened that she took a few steps back. She looked at the woman standing in front of her in shock. Her eyes were wide open. She was obviously frightened. Who are you? Chapter 1983. She even forgot to run. There was only one lamp on the rooftop, and the light was extremely dim. Hence, she couldn't see the woman's face clearly at that moment. She could only see that she was wearing a hospital gown that had been washed until it was white. She seemed to be in a daze. As soon as she finished speaking, she actually let out a few extremely sinister laughs. Ha! That woman only cared about herself as she laughed foolishly. Her gaze landed on Yin Shirshir, and she started to close in on her. Yin Shirshir's expression stiffened. Her laughter was too sinister, as if she was a malicious spirit that had walked out from purgatory. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, as if she was here to claim her life. It was extremely sinister. Yin Shirshir held her breath for a moment. She was so shocked that she instinctively took a few steps back. For a moment, she actually forgot to run. Yin Shirshir, you caused me so much trouble. That woman laughed maniacally as she raised her head. Her voice was mournful and shrill as it reverberated on the empty rooftop. It made one's heart shudder and feel waves of numbness. You've caused me so much trouble. Return my child to me. Return my child to me. She screamed shrilly. Her sharp voice seemed to pierce through people's eardrums. The light fell on her face, and that sinister and distorted face was reflected in her eyes. It was a face that was unfamiliar, yet familiar. Muwanru. Yin Shirshir turned pale with fright, and her face instantly turned pale. She didn't realize that the person in front of her was actually her. How could it be her? She didn't know how Muwanru had become like this. Yin Shirshir frowned. She was so nervous that she was about to suffocate. She clenched her fists tightly and stared at her every move unguardedly. She saw that she was wearing a hospital gown. From the words printed on the hospital gown, it was actually a mental hospital. She had a deep memory of this mental hospital. It was one of the most famous mental hospitals in the capital, and there were many severely mentally ill patients there. In her impression, Muwanru was noble, elegant, graceful, and beautiful. However, right now, her beautiful black hair was as messy as withered grass, with gray and white streaks intersecting with each other. It was unknown what she had experienced during this period of time. Her black hair was actually mixed with a lot of white hair. Looking from afar, she looked like she had aged several decades overnight. Her face was also extremely aged. The wrinkles on her forehead were very deep, and her face revealed a sickly and pale haggardness. Because she was so thin, her eyes and cheeks were sunken in, and her cheekbones were protruding. Especially her lips, they were withered and cracked, like the earth that had been dry for a long time. She had lost weight. Originally, she was still a little plump, but now she was as thin as bones, like a walking skeleton. This description was not exaggerated at all. Looking at her pair of wrists, they were all skin and bones with blue veins popping out. It was unknown what kind of torture she had suffered. Her body was covered in wounds, and there were many scratches on her exposed neck. Although they had healed, the unsightly scars looked as if her flesh had been gouged out. It was extremely disgusting. Don't come over. Yin Shirshir stared at her warily and was extremely guarded. Return my child to me, ha! Return my child to me. Return my precious flesh and blood to me. Chapter 1984. Yin Shirshir, I've finally found you. Do you still remember me? In the blink of an eye, she resumed her foolish look as she stretched out her sinister hands and pounced towards her. You caused my son's death. I want you to pay with your life. She pounced towards Yin Shirshir like a maniac. Yin Shirshir's reaction wasn't slow as she saw her pouncing over with bared fangs and brandished claws. She nimbly dodged and ran towards the direction of the door. Muwanru pounced on empty air, but she quickly turned around and sprinted a few steps. Reaching out her hand, she grabbed onto Yin Shirshir's hair. Following the tearing of her scalp, a strand of Yin Shirshir's hair was viciously pulled out. She only felt her hair being pulled hard, and she lost her balance as she fell onto the ground. Mu Wanru was like a ferocious beast as she pinned her down and her pair of hands grabbed on her throat, strangling her like a maniac. Under extreme madness, a person's potential was limitless. Even a person who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken would possess limitless strength. Mu Wanru's strength was terrifying as she pinned her down and couldn't move at all. Following that was a world-destroying darkness. Mu Wanru's hand was strangling her throat, and a strong and terrifying pressure caused her to be unable to breathe freely. Yun Shishir's face instantly turned red from suffocation as though it was dripping blood. "Let go!" Yun Shishir gritted her teeth and paused after every word as her hands grabbed onto Mu Wanru's hair and tore it together with her. The scariest thing about a person was nothing more than a maniac. Perhaps it was because she had gone crazy. All of her senses were not clear. Even after Yun Shishir tore off a few strands of her hair, Mu Wanru still seemed to be unable to feel any pain. She continued to laugh crazily in a daze. Even though her head was already dripping with blood and a piece of her scalp had been torn off, she still did not flinch. Yun Shishir was on the verge of suffocating. Her throat was tightly gripped, and even the basic right to breathe was taken away. For a moment, her brain was in a state of chaos and buzzing. As a result, other than Mu Wanru's hysterical roars, she could no longer perceive any other sounds. Veins popped out on Yun Shishir's forehead. She felt that her eyes were swollen and painful due to the pressure. In a place of despair and despair, as if she had gone crazy, her hands groped around on the ground. Suddenly, she touched a piece of gravel. Grabbing it with one hand, she raised her head with difficulty and aimed it at her temple, viciously smashing it. Mu Wanru cried out in pain and loosened her grip. Yun Shishir desperately escaped from the sea of suffering under her and flipped to one side. Hugging her throat, she started coughing violently. Cough, cough. She was like a terminally ill patient who was struggling at death's door. Kneeling on the ground, she wanted to stand up. However, all the blood in her body rushed to the top of her head. The moment she stood up, her body collapsed onto the ground in pain. Cough, cough, cough. Yun Shishir coughed violently. From the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw Mu Wanru standing up from the ground. Even though her head was bleeding, her malevolent eyes were fixed on her, and she pounced over. The two of them rolled to one side and started fighting. "Lunatic, you lunatic, get lost." Chapter 1985. Mu Wanru, however, relied on her sheer strength to land slap after slap on her face. What was scarier was that she seemed to have lost all sense of pain. She did not even feel the slightest bit of pain and did not even flinch. Slap, slap. Mu Wanru cursed at the top of her lungs as she made up her mind to put her to death. While Yun Shishir was terrified, she also felt extremely hopeless and helpless. Her head was buzzing. When a person went crazy, it was scarier than a ghost. She did not feel pain and did not know how to retreat. She was single-minded, as if she was determined to perish together with her. "I'm going to kill you. Yun Shishir, I'm going to kill you and let you be buried with my flesh and blood." The mournful words echoed in her ears over and over again, piercing her eardrums to the point of rumbling. She finally understood that this Mu Wanru was probably triggered by something and went crazy. But she really did not understand. Mu Wanru kept saying that she wanted her to be buried with her flesh and blood, but she did not remember when Mu Wanru had a child. Wasn't she infertile? However, Mu Wanru was indeed crazy. She was truly crazy. After she became an adult, she was diagnosed, and the conclusion was that she would never be able to have a child in this lifetime. It was not easy for her to adjust her mentality and accept this fact, but one day, when she found out that she was pregnant with his child, she suddenly realized that all of this was a trap that Mu Yaja had set for her. She was completely unaware that she had fallen deeply into his trap and had become a pawn in his hands. From the beginning to the end, she was the one being used. In vain, she had schemed and worked hard just to truly integrate into the Mu family and become Mu Yaja's legitimate wife. She had always thought that her infertility was her problem. Hence, she always felt guilty towards Mu Yaja. She was unable to give birth to a child for him, and she was full of guilt. Therefore, even if the child was born to another woman, although she never treated them as her own, she never made things difficult for them and raised them with all her heart. But in the end, she found out that she was pregnant. The child, on the other hand, was killed by Mu Yichen's gun in an accident. Mu Yichen was the child of Yin Shishir and Mu Yaja. She had raised him up, but who would have thought that he would become the murderer of her unborn child? How could she accept such a cruel and bloody fact? So, in the end, she had fallen into a complete scam. It was a pity that she was so naive, but in the end, she became a complete joke. Her child was gone. She could have given birth. But why didn't he accept her? Since he had chosen her to be his fiancée, why couldn't he accept her from his heart? Even if they didn't really love each other, even if it was just an undeserved reputation, she still wanted to be his wife and help him raise his child. Was this thought too much? She felt miserable. She thought of that poor child in her dreams. It was supposed to be a healthy child, but in the end, it couldn't be saved. Did he really have to be so cruel? In the end, wasn't it all because of this woman? Yin Shishir. It was all her fault. If it wasn't for her, if she hadn't interfered, she could have found happiness. Perhaps, through hard work, she could have gained Mu Yaja's recognition. Chapter 1986. Mu Wanru's eyes lit up with flames, just like the hellfire in purgatory. Yin Shishir. Everything was because of this wretched woman. She was the main culprit. Kill her. She must definitely kill her, and let her accompany her own flesh and blood in death. If it wasn't for her, she would definitely be able to obtain happiness in Mu Yaja's heart. But her interference had ruined everything. It was this demonic thought that had driven her crazy. Mu Wanru grabbed onto Yin Shishir's hair and viciously smashed the back of her head onto the ground. But in that instance, Yin Shishir only felt a buzz in her head, and it was so painful that her eyes were filled with shock. The world seemed to have overlapped with each other, and every breath was extremely clear in her ears. But it was also this instance that completely ignited her latent will to live. She couldn't die. She knew very well that if she didn't resist and break free from this crazy woman, she would definitely be forced to her death. She couldn't die. With this determination, her entire body seemed to have been injected with adrenaline, and in that instance, it was as if countless amounts of energy had been condensed. Yin Shishir suddenly grabbed onto Mu Wanru's hair, and without knowing where she got the strength from, she kicked her away. Mu Wanru suddenly fell backwards onto the ground and was unprepared for Yin Shishir's kick to one side. This time, Yin Shishir's strength was unparalleled, and her latent will to live had given her a huge amount of strength. Mu Wanru only felt a wave of pain in her stomach as she violently vomited out a trace of blood. That kick had actually caused her internal organs to rupture. Not knowing if it was stomach bleeding or something else, Mu Wanru crawled on the ground and vomited out another mouthful of blood. Yin Shishir climbed up from the ground and regained her energy as she suddenly pounced over and kicked Mu Wanru to the ground again. She viciously kicked her a few times, and seeing her struggling to get up, she suddenly sat on top of her and viciously punched her face. Bang! Mu Wanru was hit so hard that she was dizzy. Yin Shishir followed her example and grabbed her hair, slamming her to the ground. What right do you have to resent me? Mu Wanru, if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for you. Yin Shishir's eyes were bloodshot. She gritted her teeth, and her voice was filled with hatred, anger, and grievance. The bitterness that had been suppressed for so many years had finally been released. All of a sudden, it erupted like a flood. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how to wander around. If it wasn't for you, and I wouldn't have had to suffer so much. You're clearly the one who snatched everything from me, yet you don't reflect on yourself. Instead, you bully me time and time again. Are you blaming me? Is this my fault? Bang! In the crazy wrestling, Mu Wanru's head hit the ground countless times, and blood flowed from her head. I worked so hard to survive. I'm not a third party. Am I the one who interfered and caused you to be like this? No, you brought this upon yourself. You can't live. Yin Shishir was furious as she fought back crazily. Mu Wanru didn't have the strength to fight back. She allowed Yin Shishir to violently grab her hair and slam her to the ground time and time again. She had a splitting headache and even felt her head spinning. She was so numb that she had lost all sense of pain. Even if she fought back, Yin Shishir quickly blocked her attacks. Chapter 1987. You're the cruel executioner. It's you, not me. Everything that you're in now is your own fault. After Mu Wanru lost consciousness for a short while, her hatred was revived. The expression on her face became even more ferocious and fierce, like a wild beast eyeing its prey. There had never been a woman who would display the ferocity of a wild beast. Mu Wanru's murderous aura was as frightening as that of a malicious spirit. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Mu Wanru's desperate and hoarse roar reverberated on the huge rooftop, reverberating with waves of chilling, murderous intent. She also did not know where the terrifying strength came from. She suddenly got up and tangled with Yin Shishir again. The two of them rolled a few meters away from the edge of the rooftop and started wrestling with each other, throwing punches at each other. A few meters away from the edge, as far as the eye could see, it was more than 100 meters high in the sky. Once they lost their footing and fell, they would be smashed to pieces. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Yin Shishir, you deserve to die. You deserve to die. Go to hell. Mu Wanru roared angrily as she hit her crazily. Yin Shishir parried and fought back at the same time. The two of them were covered with cuts and bruises at the same time. Especially Mu Wanru. She was in an even more miserable state. Not only was there a wound on her face, blood was flowing from the back of her head. The hospital gown on her was also torn into tatters and did not cover her body at all. Yin Shishir was in good condition. Only the corner of her mouth was bruised, and there was a bloody wound on her forehead, which was bleeding nonstop. Her clothes were stained with dust as they fought. However, Mu Wanru was determined to kill. Taking advantage of Yin Shishir's distraction, she strangled her neck again. Yin Shishir felt suffocated. Her vision turned black, and her throat felt like it was being crushed by a jack. She felt that her throat was about to be broken. Just when she felt that she was about to suffocate, bang! A loud sound was heard. In the next second, Mu Wanru's eyes widened and her body stiffened horribly. Following that, she swayed and fell to one side. Yin Shishir opened her eyes with difficulty. She covered her throat and was extremely defensive. Hua Jin's nervous face came into view. Shishir, he helped her up and held her in his arms. His heart ached as he looked at the wounds all over her body. His eyes were filled with tears. Especially when she saw the scars on his forehead, she felt a great heartache. Don't be afraid. It's me, Hua Jin. I'm sorry. I'm late. Yin Shishir instinctively wanted to defend herself and break free, but Hua Jin quickly and gently comforted her, finally calming her down. At first, when Yin Shishir left the room, Hua Jin had planned to rest. But no matter how he thought about it, it felt strange. Based on his understanding of Qinzhou, what was so important that he couldn't say it over the phone or in the room? Why did he want to meet on the rooftop? It just so happened that the hotel's front desk system was hacked. How could there be such a coincidence? It was too strange. Hua Jin was so worried that he hurried to the rooftop. There were two passageways to the rooftop. Yin Shishir took door A, but he took door B. Door B was already closed and locked. There was a door between the two passageways that he couldn't break through. He had no choice but to turn back and go through the elevator. Door A was not locked. When he arrived at the rooftop, he saw a shocking scene. Chapter 1988. If she was the slightest bit careless and fell from a height of more than 100 meters, she would undoubtedly be smashed to pieces. Hua Jin rushed over, picked up a broken iron pipe from the ground, and smashed it hard on Mu Wanru's head. When Yin Shishir saw that it was him, she heaved a sigh of relief, and her whole body relaxed. You're here, Hua Jin. Yeah, I'm here. Don't be afraid. You're safe. You'll be fine. He comforted her in such a gentle voice. as if he was comforting a frightened child who had been awakened by a nightmare. He was the one who was the most afraid. If he had come a little later, who knew what this crazy woman would have done to her? The consequences would have been unimaginable. He should have known that this was probably a trap. Who would ask someone to meet on the rooftop in the middle of the night to talk? It was such a cold day, and Qin Zhou was not an idiot. She was so stupid to actually believe it. Nowadays, hacker technology was so advanced that it was not difficult to steal a person's phone IP to send a text message. Qin Zhou had clearly told her to stay in her room and not go anywhere. If there was anything, she could just call him. However, Yin Shishir had called him several times, but she could not get through. For a moment, she did not even think about the possibility of a hacker stealing her phone IP. She only suspected that Qin Zhou really had something important to say. In the end, she was confused because she was too concerned. After the soul-stirring fight just now, her heart was still beating like thunder, and she could not calm down. Hua Jin carefully held her in his arms. His face was gentle and loving, and in the end, it more or less comforted her uneasy heartbeat. Yin Shishir's originally frightened heart was actually melted by his words. She let go of all her defenses and hugged him. She was still in shock and started to cry bitterly. It would have been better if she did not cry. Once she cried, Hua Jin's eyes could not help but moisten. In his eyes, Shishir was used to being a quiet and calm person. No matter how big the storm was, she would always be able to face it calmly. But what kind of terrible thing had she experienced to make her cry so hysterically? Perhaps he was really frightened. Hua Jin's heart ached for her grievances. He gently comforted her and gently patted her back to calm her down. At the same time, he gently kissed her forehead, as if he had just survived a disaster. "Good girl, it's my fault. I was careless and made you worried. Sure, forgive me, don't cry. My heart is about to break if you cry like this." Seeing her crying in his arms, Hua Jin finally understood what it meant to be heartbroken. Pain filled his entire heart. Yin Shishir gradually stopped crying. After she recovered some of her physical strength, she choked and said, "Let's get out of here quickly." "All right, call the police." Yin Shishir gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words. She didn't know if Mu Wanru was still breathing, but she didn't dare to touch her. This was the primary crime scene. Right now, they should call the police immediately and let the police handle it. Okay. Hua Jin wanted to carry her, but this action affected the wound on her back. Yin Shishir was in so much pain that she frowned. The rooftop was made of cement, and the ground was very rough with jagged gravel. The wound on her back was probably caused by the gravel during the scuffle. Yin Shishir insisted on walking on her own. Chapter 1989. Yin Shishir insisted on walking on her own. Hua Jin had no other choice. He placed her on the ground and supported her steadily, supporting her center of gravity. At the side, Mu Wanru was lying on the ground with her face facing the ground. Her knuckles suddenly moved, and her eyes suddenly opened, emitting a cold glint. However, all of Hua Jin's attention was focused on her, and he did not notice it at all. "Walk slowly, be careful." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps coming from behind him. He turned around abruptly, only to be shocked to find Mu Wanru, who had gotten up from the ground unknowingly, rushing toward him as if she were flying. He felt suffocated and subconsciously shielded Yin Shishir behind him. "Hua Jin, what are you doing?" What was he trying to do? Before Yin Shishir could recover from her shock, she heard a hysterical shout. "I'm going to kill you." It was a roar that sounded like thunder. Mu Wanru rushed over without a care for anything else. Yin Shishir also saw Mu Wanru charging over from the corner of her eye. She subconsciously exclaimed, but Hua Jin had already pulled her behind him, just as she reached out to grab his sleeve. However, in the midst of her shock, sparks flew. At that moment, it was as if she was in a bottomless ice cellar, and the chill was bone-chilling. The cold wind was biting cold. Under the moonlight, a sharp dagger flashed with an extremely dazzling cold glint in an instant. Then, in the next second, the sharp cold glint ruthlessly pierced through the flesh. It happened almost in an instant. Poof! A strange sound, The sound of flesh being pierced caused her brain to immediately crash. Ugh! Hua Jin grunted, and the muscles on his face stiffened. A line of blood splattered on the ground. Immediately after, blood that was filled with the stench of blood flowed along the edge of the saber and dripped onto the ground. Yin Shishir widened her eyes in shock. Her pupils reflected Hua Jin's painful and forbearing face, as well as Mu Wanru's ferocious and cruel gaze. Yin Shishir, I'll kill you. I want you to die with me. Be buried with him. Hysterical screams resounded over and over again on the rooftop. Hua Jin gritted his teeth and lowered his head. A dagger ruthlessly pierced his abdomen. As she lowered her head, Mu Wanru held the dagger and exerted force once more, stabbing it even deeper. Hua Jin's body swayed slightly. His legs went soft, and he half-knelt on the ground, frozen on the spot. Hua Jin! Hua Jin! Yin Shishir stared blankly at this scene, especially at the blood-soaked ground. Her mind went blank in an instant. Tears welled up in her eyes. She gritted her teeth fiercely, and her eyes that were filled with monstrous rage swept towards Mu Wanru. You're the one who deserves to die. Yin Shishir lunged over and choked her neck. She was in a state of extreme despair, so much so that she hysterically choked Mu Wanru's neck, determined to kill her. You're the one who deserves to die. Mu Wanru, you're the one who deserves to die. She was crying and shouting. Why did she always have to hurt others? Why did she have to resort to unscrupulous means to take revenge on others for her misfortune? I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Yin Shishir choked her and forced her to the edge of the building. Behind Mu Wanru, if she took another half-step back, she would be 100,000 feet high in the sky. The wild evening wind tore at their clothes. You want me to die? Ha ha ha. Then let's perish together. Chapter 1990. Yin Shishir shrank back, but Mu Wanru seemed determined to perish together with her. She took a step back, and her body fell down the building. Due to the heavy inertia and Mu Wanru's unrelenting grip on her hand, Yin Shishir's center of gravity was dragged down by her as well. No! Hua Jin's screams could be heard from behind. Ha ha! Yin Shishir, go to hell with me. The second before she fell, Mu Wanru threw her head back and laughed wantonly. Using all her strength, she cursed at her before her body plummeted to the ground at a rapid speed. Yin Shishir was caught off guard and was brought down the edge of the building. The feeling of losing one's center of gravity was terrifying. She was about to fall from the sky. She imagined the scene of her body being smashed into pieces. It would be a horrible sight. In an instant, time seemed to have stopped, and the miserable state of death flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. Then, Yu and Shaoi Chen's innocent smiles appeared before her eyes. Mommy! No, she couldn't die. She couldn't die. Her strong will to live made her whole body quiver. Yin Shishir gasped for breath. Her body was about to leave the ground and fall to the ground. At this critical moment, she used all her strength. After calming down, she stretched out her hands and grabbed a steel pipe at the edge of the building. She managed to stabilize her center of gravity after holding onto it. However, her entire body was hanging outside the building. She glanced at the neon lights of the city below her. The city was bustling, and the stars were falling. Humans were as small as ants. Fear and uneasiness from the high altitude made her not dare to look down again. From the corner of her eye, she could only see Mu Wanru's free-falling figure. Her limbs were stretched out, and she was still letting out a heart-piercing, maniacal laughter. Her body was ethereal like a thin piece of paper fluttering in the cold wind. At this moment, human life was actually so fragile. Being blown by the cold wind outside the tall building, it floated down to the ground. Immediately after, there was a loud bang. Even though he was more than 100 meters in the air, he could still clearly hear the sound of the collision with the ground. He could even hear the screams of the passers-by, which made his hair stand on end. Yin Shishir closed her eyes tightly. Witnessing a person go from a fresh life to hell was so shocking. Tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. Yin Shishir cried as she clung tightly to the edge. She desperately clung to the gap, but her arm strength was not enough to support all of her weight. In the past, when she saw people climbing cliffs on TV, she always felt anxious and helpless. However, after experiencing it personally, it turned out that a person's strength was so weak. She was on the brink of death. She didn't know how long she could hold on without anyone's help. If he was the slightest bit careless, even if it was the slightest loosening of his finger joint, he might fall into eternal damnation. Imagining the miserable scene of falling to the ground with her limbs twisted and her head bleeding, Yun Shishir was scared out of her wits. She originally thought that she was very brave and was not afraid of the threat of death. However, facing death directly, no matter how deep one's understanding was, one was not so strong that one was not afraid of death. She then realized that she was actually so afraid of death. Hang in there. Sure. Chapter 1991. Yun Shishir widened her eyes and saw Hua Jin's pained face. He crawled over with difficulty and reached out his hand to her. Hold on to me. Hold on to my hand. Yun Shishir panted heavily and shook her head. No, you can't hold on to me. Trust me. Hua Jin endured the pain and stretched out his hand. Hold on to me. Yun Shishir hesitantly tried to loosen her left hand. However, she only loosened a finger joint and her body suddenly sank. She almost lost her grip and fell. At this moment, her whole body was tense. All her nerves and joints were in a deadlock. Even if she loosened a finger joint, she would lose her center of gravity. If she loosened her hand, Hua Jin would not be able to catch her in time, and she would fall. Hua Jin, I can still hold on. Sure, with your arm strength. You won't be able to hold on for long. Hua Jin's face was solemn and serious. He no longer had the playful and joking look he used to have. You won't be able to hold on for more than a minute. A woman's strength could not be compared to a man's. In this situation, even a man would not be able to turn danger into safety without anyone's help. Not to mention a weak woman who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Be good, listen to me. I'll definitely catch you. Trust me, okay? Yun Shishir was still hesitant. Large beads of sweat seeped out from her forehead. If I can't catch you, I'll accompany you. Hua Jin squeezed out a bitter smile and tried to reach out his hand to her. Trust me, sure, I don't want you to die. Hua Jin said painfully, Please, I beg you, hold on to me. Yun Shishir gritted her teeth. She couldn't care less anymore. She closed her eyes and made up her mind. She suddenly loosened her left hand and tried to reach out to him. When she loosened her hand, her right hand was not strong enough to support the weight of her body. She was about to fall in the next second. In the blink of an eye, Hua Jin reached out and grabbed her arm. I got you. He smiled in pleasant surprise and looked at her, but his face was already covered in cold sweat. Hua Jin. Yun Shishir was also covered in cold sweat. She gasped for breath as she called out his name, tears continuously flowing down her cheeks. Hua Jin was stunned for a moment, but his lips curled into a smile. Then, with all his strength, he grabbed her arm and dragged her to his side. In Yun Shishir's eyes, Hua Jin was so thin and weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. She didn't know that there was such a great power hidden in his body. Although it only took a dozen seconds, it felt like a century. He dragged half of her body up. Yun Shishir crawled on the ground and tried her best to climb up. Lying on the ground, she was so tired that she panted. Thank you. Yun Shishir looked up and saw that Hua Jin seemed to have exhausted all his energy. He was lying on the ground, unconscious. Hua Jin. She reached out and pushed his shoulder gently. From the corner of her eye, she saw a pool of blood under his body. It was a shocking sight. She turned back and saw a long mottled trail of blood. He actually crawled over from where he stood. His abdomen was injured and blood was flowing out from the wound. Hua Jin, wake up, don't scare me. Yun Shishir held his face in fear and patted it again and again. Chapter 1992. His handsome but pale face was covered in cold sweat. His eyes were tightly shut, but his eyelashes were trembling faintly. Hua Jin, don't scare me. I beg you, don't scare me. Yun Shishir desperately helped him up. She didn't have time to think too much. She held his arm and tried to help him up, but his body was so weak that he couldn't maintain his center of gravity. He had already fainted. Yun Shir was extremely scared. She didn't know where Mu Wanru had stabbed him. She didn't know if it was a vital part. She cried, begged, and prayed. She carried Hua Jin on her back and staggered down the stairs. Help! Help! Someone save me! Someone save me! Yun Shir carried Hua Jin all the way to the elevator. Her screams for help echoed in the empty corridor. But no one responded. There was no one on the 27th floor. Yun Shir stood at the entrance of the elevator and pressed the button with all her might. However, the indicator light on the screen was still on the 17th floor. She didn't know why, but it didn't move. There was only one elevator light that led to the 27th floor. The elevator stayed on the 17th floor and didn't move. She was going crazy. Hurry! Hurry! Yun Shir pressed the button crazily. Finally, the number started to jump, but it stopped at the 20th floor. Hurry! Yun Shir urged at the top of her lungs. She almost broke the button. Just as she was about to break down, the elevator stopped and finally reached the 28th floor. Yun Shir was so anxious that she was about to cry. When the elevator door opened, Yun Shir carried Hua Jin and rushed in recklessly. There were many people standing in the elevator. They saw a woman covered in blood suddenly rushing in from the dark corridor. She was carrying a man on her back, and they didn't know if he was dead or alive. They screamed in fear. Yun Shir couldn't take it anymore and asked them for help. Call 120. Hurry up. What's the situation? What happened? A terrorist attack. So much blood. Yun Shir was on the verge of tears. She pleaded again and again, call the police. I beg you, call the police. All right. It was probably because they saw how helpless she was and how she didn't seem like a bad person. The man she was carrying was unconscious, covered in blood, and looked like he was on his last breath. These people reacted quickly and immediately picked up their phones to call 120. The other one was more quick-witted. He even helped her call the police and briefly explain the situation. The elevator soon reached the first floor. With everyone's help, Hua Jin was carefully carried out. The lobby manager at the front desk was on duty. He had just received a call saying that someone had fallen off the building and was about to go out to check on the situation. When he saw this scene, he was scared out of his wits. Where's the infirmary? Yun Shir grabbed the manager's clothes and asked anxiously, Miss, please calm down. How am I supposed to calm down when he's already dying? Take him to the infirmary and stop the bleeding. All right. Although the lobby manager didn't understand the situation, he still led Yun Shir to the infirmary. Shir. All of a sudden, Hua Jin let out a feeble voice. Yun Shir immediately went over. I'm here, okay. Chapter 1993. Hearing her voice, Hua Jin instantly closed his eyes in relief. Yun Shir held his hand tightly. However, his hand was cold and devoid of warmth, probably due to the excessive blood loss. She furrowed her brows anxiously. Hua Jin suddenly opened his eyes slowly. His worried gaze landed on her as he kept probing back and forth. What's wrong? Yun Shir immediately went forward to ask, thinking that he needed something. However, the first sentence that came out of his mouth was an extremely hoarse question. Are you injured? For a moment, Yun Shir felt as though her throat was blocked by something and she couldn't make a sound, especially when she saw the ghastly red wound on Hua Jin's abdomen. She instantly burst into tears. She clenched her teeth to stop herself from crying out loud. However, when she thought of who this man in front of her was on the brink of death, she instantly felt as though a knife was being twisted in her heart. Remorse, self-blame, sadness, worry, all sorts of emotions welled up in her heart. Her tears flowed into the gaps of her lips, and her mouth was filled with bitterness. Why? Why did you do this? Yun Shir knew in her heart that Hua Jin had been stabbed with a dagger, and it was already very serious. However, in order to save her, he had actually crawled so far away. The friction between the wound and the cement floor was an incalculable secondary injury. Furthermore, he had dragged her so forcefully. The wound must have been torn open by an external force. She didn't know how ruthless Mu Wanru had been, and she didn't even know if this wound had hurt any vital parts. Yin Shishir was so anxious that she was going crazy. She really didn't know. If anything happened to Hua Jin, she really wouldn't be able to forgive herself. Don't cry. You look so stupid, Hua Jin smiled. His signature playful smile appeared on his sickly pale face. He said casually, actually, it doesn't hurt that much. It's just like being bitten by a mosquito. Those movies are too exaggerated. How could it hurt that much? Yin Shishir was so angry that her face turned ashen. It was already like this, but he could still joke about it so casually. He actually said that being stabbed didn't hurt at all. Hua Jin joked as he endured the excruciating pain. His originally clear and bright eyes seemed to have turned gloomy at this moment. He looked at her quietly, wanting to say something but not wanting to do so. Don't worry, okay? I'll be fine. Stop joking around. Damn it. Only the heavens knew that she was almost worried to death. Yet he still had the leisure to talk about these things. Even though she knew that Hua Jin was only saying this to lessen her guilt and not let her worry too much. But seeing him forcefully holding back, even the cold sweat on his forehead silently betrayed him. It was obviously very painful, but he still said that it was nothing. After everyone carried Hua Jin into the infirmary, the doctor saw this scene and then looked at the man who was lying on the bed with his abdomen bleeding nonstop. He turned pale with fright. He was originally dozing off, but he was instantly jolted awake. He hurriedly prepared the tools to stop the bleeding. Sorry, everyone. Please leave us for a moment. Yin Shishir didn't want to leave and wanted to guard him. Seeing her so persistent, the doctor asked, Madam, are you his family? Yes. Almost without hesitation, Yin Shishir blurted out and answered firmly. Chapter 1994. I'm his family. Let me stay here to accompany him. Okay? He needs me. Yin Shishir spoke resolutely and decisively. Seeing that she was persistent, the doctor did not chase her away. He closed the door and quickly turned back to treat the wound. Treating the wound was just a simple assessment of the injury and treatment to stop the bleeding. He cleaned the wound to prevent a second infection. Yin Shishir stood at the side, trembling in fear. Hua Jin, on the other hand, stared at her without blinking. His heart seemed to be filled with warmth, and it was incomparably warm. I'm his family. Let me stay here to accompany him, okay? He needs me. Hua Jin's lips trembled, and his eyes suddenly curved in satisfaction. An unprecedented warmth hit his heart. This was probably the warmth of being protected by family. Yin Shishir obviously did not notice his expression. Instead, she was fully focused on the doctor's every move. She could not help but observe the expression on his face, trying to find some information from his expression. She could see that the doctor's expression was grave. His brows were tightly knitted, and his expression was especially serious. Sometimes, he would frown deeply, and she was even more worried. She could not help but tear up. Hua Jin saw that she was about to cry, and his heart ached. Sure, his feeble voice immediately alarmed her. Yin Shishir hurried to his side and squatted down gently. She carefully held his outstretched hand. What's wrong? I feel very sleepy. I want to sleep for a while. Sleepy? Yin Shishir was even more flustered at this moment. She raised her head to look at the doctor for help. The doctor was fully focused on stopping the bleeding and had no time to care about her pleas. Will you always be with me? Hua Jin suddenly asked. Yin Shishir turned to look at him and nodded desperately. I will. I will always be with you. After a pause, she looked at him with teary eyes and pleaded. Hua Jin, don't scare me, okay? How do you feel now? Does it still hurt? What does it hurt? It hurts everywhere. The current him found it difficult to even say a few words, and his eyes were slowly closing. Don't sleep. Yin Shishir was just about to say something when a flurry of footsteps came from outside the door. The ambulance is here. Someone shouted from outside the door. The doctor had just finished his work to stop the bleeding and immediately opened the door. Outside the door, several medical staff rushed in. Where are the injured? Here. Has the bleeding stopped? We've already stopped the bleeding, but we don't know the condition of the wound. We need to do a further examination to know the extent of the injury. What's his blood pressure? A group of people hurriedly brought a stretcher over. The paramedics anxiously placed the patient on the stretcher and secured him before rushing to the ambulance. Hua Jin closed his eyes as if he had fainted. Amidst the hubbub of voices, Yin Shirshir suddenly felt that the world had suddenly become deathly silent. Every scene she saw had lost its color, and all the scenes had become incomparably slow. The voices of those arguing were especially piercing. Hua Jin was placed on the stretcher. His expression was calm, and his face was pale as he was escorted away. Chapter 1995. Wait a minute. Yin Shirshir immediately called out to the ambulance. However, the next second, the door of the ambulance was tightly shut. Accompanied by the sound of the siren, the ambulance sped away. At the side, many onlookers were pointing at the scene. What happened? Someone jumped off the building, and a man was stabbed with a knife. He lost a lot of blood. Stabbed with a knife? Can he still be saved? He should be fine. You don't understand. In the past, when I was studying, there was a gang fight at the school gate. I saw a person who was stabbed in the abdomen. He held the wall and knelt on the ground for more than 20 minutes before he fell unconscious. When the ambulance arrived, he was pronounced dead on the spot. So scary. Yeah, they said that the knife pierced his liver, but it was useless at that time. Young people nowadays, they don't cherish their lives at all. I thought it was a mafia meeting in the movies. They even fought. Anyway, if he was stabbed with a knife and lost a lot of blood, he could still be saved. I'm afraid that if his organs were stabbed, sigh. Do you think it's some farce between the first wife and the mistress? I'm not sure. It's really bad luck. Yin Shirshir stood on the spot in a daze. Her face was numb. She saw people crowding around the entrance and pointing at something on the ground. She walked over absent-mindedly and saw a body on the ground with twisted limbs and a bleeding head. It was Mu Wanru. Yin Shirshir only took a glance and was so shocked that she turned her head away and didn't dare to take another look. The way she died was too gruesome. She fell from the rooftop and was blown by the wind for more than 10 meters. Finally, she landed in the middle of the square, which was the parking area. The person who fell from the sky made a dent in the roof of the car, and the windshield was shattered into snowflakes. When the body landed on the ground, the limbs were twisted in a very strange way. Especially the head, it was deformed. The back of the head was cracked open. The passers-by, especially the children, were so frightened that they screamed and cried. Many passers-by looked curiously, but they were frightened by the gruesome death and frowned. It's too scary. Even the brain matter is out. You're so young. Is it necessary for you to take things too hard? That's right. Some people want to live, but have no way to live. Some people can live a good life, but don't want to live. I really don't understand. She had never seen such a cruel death. In his impression, jumping off a building was still a scene in the movies. He didn't expect that death in real life would be so cruel. After the ambulance left, the police car arrived. After the lobby manager was interrogated, he immediately brought his men to the scene to investigate. A police cordon was set up at the scene. The police walked in and squatted down to examine the body. So pitiful, how did you fall? His head is crushed. Yin Shirshir, who was standing at the side, suddenly said, I fell from the 28th floor, from the rooftop. The policeman jerked his head up. How did you know? Because Yin Shirshir tugged at the corner of her lips. I watched her fall with my own eyes. Qin Zhou was awakened by the urgent ringing of the doorbell. He was tired after a long day of running around. Hence, when he returned to the hotel, he went to bed early. When he was awakened by the doorbell, he raised his watch to look at the time. It was 2 a.m. Chapter in 1996. Hello, I'm the room manager. May I know if you're Mr. Qin? Yes. It's like this. May I know if Ms. Yin Shirshir is a friend of yours? When Qin Zhou heard that, he felt nervous and opened the door. The room manager stood at the door with an anxious and guilty look on her face. Qin Zhou asked, What happened to her? It's like this. Ms. Yin Shirshir is suspected of intentional homicide and has been taken away by the police for investigation. Qin Zhou was taken aback. Intentional homicide? He suddenly laughed. Are you kidding me? The room manager smiled politely. I'm not kidding. As she said that, She handed over a business card with both hands. Qin Zhou took it. It was a police officer's business card from the Public Security Bureau. The address and contact information of the police station were written on it. Qin Zhou took a look, and his expression instantly froze. He raised his head and frowned. When was she taken away? Just 15 minutes ago. Suspected homicide. Since she's suspected of homicide, who is the victim? It's a woman. Her identity is still unknown, so we can't know too much. The room manager nodded at him. I've already reported the situation to you. Do you have any other instructions? No. Okay. The room manager turned and left. Qin Zhou held the business card tightly in his hand and hurried back to his room. He changed into casual clothes and rushed to the police station's address written on the business card. When he reached the entrance of the hotel and was about to hail a taxi, he saw the flashing lights of an ambulance. He glanced over and saw that the body had been processed and was about to be sent to the morgue. However, the pool of blood on the ground was still very eye-catching even though it was late at night and the lights were dim. The weather was cold and the blood had already coagulated. Qin Zhou furrowed his brows and watched the ambulance leave. A chill inexplicably emerged from his heart. In the police station, the incandescent lights were bright and dazzling. Yin Shishir held a cup. She did not feel thirsty, but her hands were too cold, and she wanted to use the cup to warm herself. A few policemen sat facing her with pens in their hands. They were interrogating her and taking her statements. It was quiet in the interrogation room. Only the loud and powerful voices of the policemen kept echoing in her ears. Could it be that all the policemen's voices were like loud bells to intimidate criminals? The statements had been taken for an hour. The continuous questioning made her exhausted. Questioning? Rather than calling it questioning, it was more appropriate to call it an interrogation. God knew how urgent she'd be. She wanted to end the interrogation quickly. Hua Jin was still in the hospital, and it was unknown if he was dead or alive. She couldn't stop worrying, but at this moment, she had no choice but to do a boring and torturous interrogation of the interrogation. Even though she had tried to explain herself, perhaps it was a form of interrogation. These police officers were questioning her, as if she was a criminal suspect. She really didn't kill us, she didn't. Yin Shishir wearily faced the few police officers who were interrogating her and defended herself again. Officers, you don't have to be so tough. I really didn't kill anyone. When will you let me go? Chapter 1997. Yin Shishir sneered. So, is this also a way for you to collect evidence? You're obviously pressuring me on purpose. If you didn't do it, why would you feel pressured? Only those who did something wrong will feel pressured. Yin Shishir felt that she couldn't defend herself. She lowered her head, unable to refute. Didn't you say that someone asked you to go to the rooftop? Yin Shishir nodded. She felt that her last bit of patience had been worn out. She could only answer their questions numbly. As an interrogator, the police officers were very particular with their words. Every word was especially rigid and particular. They couldn't be careless and were very strict. Yin Shishir was very tired from answering. Yes, I received a message from a friend. Which friend? My manager. What's your manager's name? Qin Zhou. What about the content of the message? Where's your mobile phone? It's not on me. I think I left it on the rooftop. The police officer immediately stood up and called his colleague who was in charge of investigating the crime scene. He requested to go to the rooftop to search for evidence. Why did your friend ask you to go to the rooftop? I don't know either. You went to the rooftop without knowing? Isn't this too unreasonable? Since you said that your friend asked you to go to the rooftop, but you said that you met the deceased on the rooftop, but your friend didn't appear. Isn't this even more unreasonable? God knows what was going on. She really did receive Qin Zhou's message. At that time, she didn't think too much about it. Although she felt that there was something fishy about it, Qin Zhou did have a sudden stroke sometimes. He once asked her to go to the riverside in the middle of the night to enjoy the cold wind. Hence, when Yin Shishir received the message, she didn't have much suspicion. Now that she thought about it, there were indeed many loopholes. For example, she couldn't get through to the phone. Until now, she still couldn't figure it out. As for Mu Wanru, she also couldn't figure out why she suddenly appeared on the rooftop. What was more frightening was that when she turned on her mobile phone and was about to take a picture, she suddenly appeared in the front camera. That terrifying scene still lingered in her mind and couldn't be erased. It was simply a live-action mystery film. Right now, she was not in the mood to be interrogated. Her heart was filled with worry about Hua Jin's condition in the hospital. Is he okay? Did it worsen? Previously, when he was at the entrance of the hotel, he heard the passers-by talking. One of them said that his abdomen was injured, and if his organs were stabbed, he would not be able to be saved, especially when he had lost too much blood. When she thought of Hua Jin's sickly pale face before he was sent to the ambulance, Yin Shirshi's heart jumped again. My friend is still in the hospital. Can I go and see him? He's injured? Is it serious? No. The police officer sternly refused. You're not going anywhere until you're done with your statement. Yin Shirshir leaned against the back of the chair dejectedly and looked up at the chandelier on the ceiling. Her eyes were empty for a moment. When Qin Zhou arrived at the police station, he did a simple registration and walked over. Yin Shirshir was sitting in the interrogation room. The third round of interrogation had just ended, but she still couldn't leave. She sat there alone, feeling lonely and helpless. The door of the interrogation room was locked from the inside. Through the glass window, he saw Yun Shirshir furrowing her brows, looking very tired. He knocked on the window. Chapter 1998. However, Qin Zhou could not hear her at all. The isolation effect in the interrogation room was very strong. Hence, Yun Shirshir could not hear what Qin Zhou was saying. Yun Shirshir could only mouth to him, "Get me out of here." Qin Zhou understood and nodded. Through the glass, he comforted her with his gaze and turned to settle the paperwork. In less than half an hour, the bail was paid and everything was settled. When Yun Shirshir followed Qin Zhou out of the police station, she briefly recounted what had happened. However, Qin Zhou was baffled by what he heard. I didn't send you that kind of message. What? Qin Zhou looked serious. Listen, I'm not joking. Even if I had the guts, I wouldn't dare to ask you to go to the rooftop in the middle of the night. Then what about the message? I didn't send it. Qin Zhou swore and even took out his mobile phone to show her. In the records, there was indeed no such message. Then what's going on? I called your mobile phone, but I couldn't get through. How could that be? Qin Zhou quickly dialed the number, but the call was normal. Yin Shirshir felt that something was amiss. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, her thoughts in a mess. Shirshir, don't tell me you're sleepwalking. You've been too nervous for the past 2 days, so you didn't have a good rest. Impossible. I would never sleepwalk. But I really didn't kill anyone. Even if I hate that woman, I would never do such a thing. However, she did not deny it. There was indeed a moment when she had the urge to push Mu Wanru down the stairs or strangle her. When people were in extreme fear and anxiety, or even when they were angry, they would often lose their rationality. However, that was also a legitimate defense. If she did not do that, she might have died in Mu Wanru's hands. Moreover, the truth was that Mu Wanru wanted to pull her down the stairs and jump off the building. At most, it was suicide. She did not kill her. It was not even considered manslaughter. However, there was no sufficient evidence to prove that she had nothing to do with Mu Wanru's death. The difficulty of this matter far exceeded her expectations and imagination. Qin Zhou comforted her. Don't worry, I believe in you. Yes. Yin Shirshir suddenly let out a sigh. Her eyebrows looked tired. But the police's evidence right now is very unfavorable to me. There's not enough evidence to prove my innocence. Qin Zhou also frowned. He felt that there were many suspicious things about this matter. There must be something fishy about this. I will send someone to investigate as soon as possible. Now, send me to the hospital. Hua Jin is still there. Hua Jin? Qin Zhou was confused. What's wrong with him? Time is of the essence. I'll tell you more on the way. All right. Qin Zhou walked to the side of the road with her, hailed a taxi, and hurried to the hospital. Before Hua Jin was sent to the ambulance, she had asked about the hospital. Hence, she knew which hospital Hua Jin was sent to. In the car, Yin Shirshir asked anxiously, Qin Zhou, will Hua Jin be all right? I don't know what kind of injury he has. If his organs are not damaged, then it's a blessing. If he is injured, he did not continue. However, when Yin Shirshir saw the grave expression on his face, her heart skipped a beat. If anything happens to him. Yin Shishir's voice stopped abruptly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Chapter 1999. Don't think too much. Qin Zhou could only comfort her in this way. When they arrived at the hospital, Yin Shishir rushed to the information desk and reported Hua Jin's name. Hua Jin. The nurse shook her head with a blank expression. We can't find out anything about this patient. It's his abdomen injury. Not long ago, he was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. Madam, please don't be nervous. We can't find any information about the name you asked for. As for the information you provided, I'm sorry, there were 2 patients who were sent to the hospital with abdomen injuries. I don't know who you're referring to. He's very young, in his early 20s. He's very good looking. Yin Shishir described anxiously. The nurse thought for a moment and called for another paramedic. Immediately, the paramedic walked up and said with a straight face, "You're the patient's family member, right?" "Yes. Come with me." "Okay." Yin Shishir and Qin Zhou immediately followed the paramedic. Along the way, the atmosphere was heavy. Yin Shishir felt as if there was a huge rock pressing on her heart. She was about to suffocate. After that, the paramedic brought them to a small room beside the emergency room. Yin Shishir had just walked to the door when she smelled a pungent smell of disinfectant. She couldn't help but frown. The paramedic opened the door casually. Inside the room, there was a gurney. There was a person lying on the gurney. His face was covered by a white cloth, and he looked lifeless. The huge room was filled with an inexplicable sadness and bleakness, as well as a heavy aura of death. This, Qin Zhou was a little stunned. The medical staff turned around and looked at her sympathetically. His tone was solemn. "My condolences. The patient's condition is very serious. He lost all signs of life when he was sent to the hospital. We're already waiting for his family to deal with him." What? Yin Shishir didn't seem to believe her ears. She looked at him suspiciously and interrupted him. "The person lying here is the person you're looking for." Yin Shishir shook her head and forced a smile. "That's impossible. Didn't you say that he's in his early 20s and is very good looking?" "Yes." Yin Shishir looked at him, her mind blank. The medical staff shook his head and said solemnly, "I can understand how you feel, but the world is unpredictable. I hope you can accept reality. My condolences." Impossible. Yin Shishir couldn't accept the reality. Her eyes widened and tears gushed out. "He can't be dead. There's a large area of trauma on the abdomen, causing the bleeding to stop. His organs were damaged, and he lost blood quickly. On the way to the hospital, the patient was already in a state of shock. It's a pity. We've done our best." "Impossible." Yin Shishir cried out in pain. She knelt on the ground helplessly, unable to accept this cruel reality. "He won't die. Before he was sent to the hospital, he even joked with me. How could it be? How could it be? My condolences." These 3 words completely crushed all her thoughts. Yin Shishir felt completely disheartened. Tears rolled down from her eyes, and her heart ached so much that she was about to suffocate. Impossible. Hua Jin was still so young and in good health. Before he was sent to the ambulance, he could still hold her hand tightly. At this moment, she could still feel his warmth in her palm. It was so real. How could they be separated by life and death in the blink of an eye? Chapter 2000. Didn't he casually say that it didn't hurt at all? 5 hours ago, he was still alive and kicking. Why was he lying in such a lifeless room now? A few doctors came into the room with reports in their hands. They looked serious, as if they were discussing something. Yin Shishir saw their furrowed brows and only heard the cold words confirmed comma dead and vital signs. She froze on the spot, her body stiffening. Qin Zhou stood at the side and frowned. He looked incredulous. Hua Jin was dead. How could it be? He couldn't accept this fact. Qin Zhou walked forward and gently held Yin Shishir's arm. He wanted to help her up, but she was half kneeling on the ground. Her eyes were wide open and tears flowed out of her eyes. "Hua Jin, you can't die." His warm voice was still vivid in her mind. However, the cold feeling of death surrounded her. She couldn't accept this cruel reality. Sure, calm down." Qin Zhou couldn't bear to see her like this and helped her up. Yin Shishir covered her face and cried bitterly. Her cries alarmed a few doctors. They immediately surrounded her and comforted her. "Madam, please restrain your grief. Don't hurt your body. The world is unpredictable. The dead are gone. The living should face life with a smile. 9 out of 10 things in life don't go your way." Yin Shishir couldn't listen to a single word. She covered her face and cried bitterly. Suddenly, there was a series of hurried and messy footsteps outside the door. A man's heart-wrenching howl was heard. "Exionnaire! Exionnaire!" Qin Zhou was startled. He turned around in confusion and saw a man in his late 20s or early 30s stumbling into the room. He threw himself at the side of the blood-stained bed and hugged the corpse as he cried out loud. "Exionnaire! Exionnaire! Which bastard did this to you? Which bastard did this to you? You were fine. How could you be gone just like that? You were clearly fine this morning." Before Yin Shishir could react, a few more family members rushed in from outside the door. They were both men and women. They threw themselves at the bedside and wailed. "Exionnaire! Daughter, my good daughter, don't die, you can't die. Do you have the heart to abandon your husband and child?" Yin Shishir and Qin Zhou were completely stunned by the deafening cries. This was especially so for Yin Shishir. 2 streams of tears were still hanging on her face. For a moment, she didn't know whether to continue crying or to stop and observe the situation first. "Exionnaire! What exionnaire? He must have mistaken the corpse for someone else." Yin Shishir and Qin Zhou looked at each other awkwardly. Just as they were in a daze, the man who had rushed in first suddenly stood up agitatedly, turned around, and glared fiercely at Qin Zhou. He then strode forward and grabbed the latter's collar. Qin Zhou was even more confused. He frowned and glared at him. "What are you doing? Is it you? Is it you? Are you the one who killed my exionnaire?" The man was so agitated that he spat saliva all over Qin Zhou's face. Qin Zhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I don't know what you're talking about. What exionnaire?" Chapter 2001. A few doctors rushed over to help. "Sir, please calm down. I think you've misunderstood. This gentleman isn't the culprit who stabbed your wife. That culprit is also injured, but he's being interrogated in the police station now." The man realized that it was a misunderstanding and immediately let go of Qin Zhou. He smiled apologetically at him. Qin Zhou tidied up his crumpled shirt and glanced at the bed. His anger had yet to subside. He suppressed his displeasure and asked calmly, "Is the person on the bed your wife?" "Yes, you are." Yin Shishir had a strange expression on her face. She was immediately speechless. She walked over and carefully lifted the white cloth. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the deceased's long hair. She heaved a sigh of relief and covered her face again. "What are you doing?" The man's face was livid. He pushed her away and glared at her. He was obviously furious at her rude behavior. I'm sorry. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." A woman's awkward voice came from outside the door. "Chairman Qin Shishir, what are you doing?" Yin Shishir and Qin Zhou turned their heads in unison, only to see Hua Jin's manager looking at them in bewilderment. "Yuqi." Qin Zhou was also shocked. Yuqi glanced at the corpse in the ward and speechlessly twitched the corner of her lips. She let out a few awkward laughs. "Don't tell me you've got the wrong person." Half an hour later, in an intensive care unit, Hua Jin lay quietly on the bed. His face was pale and his skin was sickly thin. His eyes were tightly shut. His handsome and beautiful face at this moment did not have a trace of life due to excessive blood loss. He was very thin. Usually, he could hide it with makeup. Now, without all the adornments, his thin face was exposed. He was too thin, especially his wrist, which was about the same size as hers. He had lost too much blood and needed 2 bags of blood. Yin Shishir sat by the bed and glanced at the tag hanging on the bed. Hua Jin's real name was Rongjin, so that was his name. Rongjin. Is his surname Rong? Yin Shishir stared at Hua Jin's face in a daze. Other than her and Hua Jin's manager, Ji Yuqi, was also in the ward. After getting along on the plane, Yin Shishir and Ji Yuqi got along well. Qin Zhou went out to take care of some affairs. Since it was confirmed that both of them were fine, there were still many things left to deal with. Ji Yuqi sat on the edge of the bed, peeling an apple as she sighed. I received a call from the hospital in the middle of the night, saying that Hua Jin was injured. I was so scared that I cried as I took a taxi to the hospital, but it turned out to be a false alarm. The doctor said that he had stabbed his appendix with a knife and cut it off. It was nothing serious, but he had lost a lot of blood and needed a blood transfusion. However, there was a scar on her abdomen. In the future, she would have to think of a way to deal with the scar. Otherwise, it would be very awkward to shoot a photo. Ji Yuqi was still thinking about the future of her career. She was more worried that Hua Jin's injury would affect her upcoming jobs. If she met with a difficult organizer, she would have to face a sky-high penalty. Secondly, having a scar on her body was a big taboo for an idol. Yin Shirshir suddenly felt a great heartache for Hua Jin. Chapter 2002. However, she felt that in Ji Yuqi's eyes, Hua Jin was a commodity without any value other than a money tree. She couldn't feel how much Ji Yuqi cared about Hua Jin. At least, even if she cared, it was only about how much profit she would lose after the loss of a commodity. She was too cold. From the moment she entered the ward until now, what Ji Yuqi mentioned the most was the series of losses brought about by Hua Jin's injury. In fact, in Ji Yuqi's eyes, Yin Shirshir was a problem. To Hua Jin, she was a problem. To her, she was even more of a problem. Earlier on, when Hua Jin revealed his longing and yearning for Yin Shirshir, she had ruthlessly interrupted Hua Jin's thoughts. On the surface, Ji Yuqi was his manager, but in reality, she was the guardian that woman placed by Hua Jin's side. She monitored Hua Jin's every move. Hence, she was extremely guarded against Yin Shirshir. Yin Shirshir suddenly asked, "What's the situation with Exine just now?" Ji Yuqi thought for a moment and said, "I heard that she was robbed in the middle of the night. When she resisted, she was stabbed twice by the robber and died on the spot." So pitiful. She thought that it was Hua Jin and cried for a long time. In the end, she got the wrong person and made a mistake. Luckily, Hua Jin didn't see this scene. Otherwise, he would definitely laugh at her like an idiot. The apple was peeled, cut into pieces, and placed on a plate. Ji Yuqi wiped her fingers with a wet tissue and looked up. Her face had returned to its usual cold expression. Sure, I want to talk to you about something. As for me, I hope you can keep a distance from Hua Jin." As Ji Yuqi spoke, she placed the plate on the table and looked at her warily. "You're too close to him." Yin Shirshir was stunned for a moment. She looked at her questioningly and curled her lips. "What do you mean by that?" "I know. It's Hua Jin who has been trying to get close to you. However, you should also know that a child like Hua Jin is still immature. He has no idea what kind of price he would have to pay for doing such a thing." Yin Shirshir suddenly interrupted her coldly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then I'll be straightforward." Ji Yuqi suddenly raised her eyebrows and smiled deeply. "Didn't anyone warn you to keep a distance from Hua Jin when you stepped into this circle?" Yin Shirshir frowned. Of course, someone had warned him. Qinzhou alone had warned him more than once. However, she did not know the reason. "Why?" "Because if you get too close to him, you'll hurt him and yourself," Ji Yuqi said honestly. "Shut up." Hua Jin's irritated scolding suddenly came from the bed. Ji Yuqi and Yin Shirshir were startled and looked at the bed together. "Hua Jin, you're awake. You're awake," they asked almost in unison. Hua Jin had woken up unknowingly. He slowly opened his eyes and glanced coldly at Ji Yuqi from the corner of his eyes. However, there was a look of disgust in his eyes. It was an inexplicable hostility. It was obvious that Hua Jin and Ji Yuqi did not have a good relationship. Most artists and managers, even if they were not as close as family, would at least get along well with each other. From the plane ride, it was obvious that Hua Jin was quite cold towards Ji Yuqi. Sometimes, when he spoke to her, he was very impatient. It was as if he did not hear her words. Chapter 2003. Hua Jin wanted to get up, but Yin Shirshir stopped him immediately. "You can't move yet. Your wound has just been stitched up. If you move around, the stitches will come off." Her concern warmed his heart. He smiled warmly and nodded. I'll listen to you." He was as obedient as a little lamb. Even Ji Yuqi was surprised. "Yeah, Hua Jin, don't move around. Be careful of your wound." You talk too much. Hua Jin looked at her, and his face turned cold. Did I ask you to speak? Ji Yuqi wanted to say something, but stopped herself. She pursed her lips awkwardly and then brought over a cut apple. Have some fruit. Go away. Hua Jin waved his hand. Crash. The container fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Yun Shir widened her eyes in shock. Get out. I don't want to see you. Hua Jin, get out. Didn't you hear me? Hua Jin stared at her angrily. Ji Yuqi had no other choice. She bit her lip and stood up awkwardly. Then she told Yun Shir, please take care of him. With that, she turned and left the ward. With a bang, the door was shut tight. Hua Jin supported himself on the bed with both hands and tried to sit up. Yun Shir walked over immediately and said, Can't you just lie down? I want to sit up. Hua Jin pouted and whined like a willful child. Yun Shir couldn't do anything to him. She raised the bedboard a little and carefully helped him sit up. She also stuffed a few soft pillows behind his back to make him more comfortable. Hua Jin looked at her in silence. His face was pale, and he looked a little helpless. He was so nervous that he didn't know where to place his hands. When Yun Shir sat down, she looked up and saw him staring at her. Why do you keep staring at me? That's nice. So, the feeling of being taken care of is so warm. Hua Jin murmured in satisfaction. Yun Shir was stunned. Is there no one to take care of you? Hua Jin shook his head and pursed his lips. Only you. Yun Shir couldn't help but feel suspicious. Hua Jin patted the edge of the bed. Don't be so far away from me. We can be considered comrades who have gone through thick and thin together. Who's your comrade? She pouted coquettishly and then sat closer to him. Hua Jin said coquettishly, Come closer. Yun Shir couldn't stop him and sat closer to him. When she sat closer, Hua Jin held her hand. Yun Shir felt as if she had touched a piece of hot iron and subconsciously flung it away. Hua Jin's facial features instantly contorted in an exaggerated manner. It seemed that her action of flinging his hand away had affected his wound, and he was in so much pain that he looked hideous. When Yun Shir saw this, she was so shocked that she immediately got up and went up to him. What's wrong? Did I hurt you? I just wanted to use your hand to get some warmth. You're so rough. He complained in an aggrieved manner, which made Yun Shir even more regretful. She immediately handed over her hand obediently and coaxed. I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Let me hold your hand, okay? No. Hua Jin raised his head lazily, looking as if he was unworthy of her status. Yun Shir was defeated by him and held his hand without any explanation. His hand was so cold. She didn't know if it was because he had lost too much blood. Chapter 2004. His hands were so cold that there was no warmth at all. She wondered if it was because he had lost too much blood. Hua Jin's eyes flickered. He gently held her hand, and the corners of his lips could not help curling into a satisfied smile. Her hands were so warm. It was a warmth that he was extremely greedy for. Actually, this kind of injury was not painful at all. In the past, he had a few of his ribs broken. That kind of pain was heart-wrenching. However, he could be considered to be lucky. If it had deviated by a few inches and hurt his organs, he would have been in deep trouble. But only God knew that he did not think so much at that time. He only wanted to protect her. He did not see when Mu Wanru had a dagger in her hand. He only knew that she was coming at him aggressively. He quickly pushed Yun Shir away, but he did not expect that she would stab him with the dagger. But he did not regret it. Thinking about it, it was still frightening. He did not know where this crazy woman came from. Who is she? Hua Jin asked about Mu Wanru. Yun Shir did not react at first. She only came back to her senses when he asked. A thief? A thief? Hua Jin did not know whether to laugh or cry. I saw that she was wearing a patient's gown. She seemed to have escaped from a mental hospital. Mental hospital? Yun Shir was suddenly alerted when he mentioned it. Mental hospital? She remembered that hospital. It was the most famous mental hospital in the capital. They were very strict with their patients. How did she escape? She did not know why Mu Wanru was in a mental hospital. She thought that Mu Yaja had dealt with her. But the flight from the capital to Sea City took 3 to 4 hours. Putting aside how Mu Wanru escaped from the mental hospital, could she have bought a plane ticket and boarded the plane? flying from the capital to Sea City? It was a little too laughable. She was so crazy that even the airport would not allow such a dangerous person to book a plane ticket. And that suspicious message. Qin said that he did not send such a message. Qin character was absolutely trustworthy. It was impossible for him to toy with her. With Mu Yaja around, even if he ate a bear's heart and leopard's guts, he would never become a ghost. So what was going on? For a moment, Yin Shirshi's mind was in a mess, and she was speechless. Hua Jin saw her silence and thought that she was unwilling to talk about it. So he said, "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it." People always had a past that they didn't want to look back on. Yin Shirshir suddenly grabbed his hand. There was something fishy about this. He had to get to the bottom of this. The first person she thought of was Song Inya. The most important person she had ever offended was Song Inya. If the latter was behind this matter, then everything made sense. Song Inya was capable of bringing Mu Wanru out of a mental hospital without anyone noticing and transporting her to Sea City. If he could get rid of her through Mu Wanru, the most optimistic outcome would be that the two thorns in his flesh would perish together. That would be great news for her. Even if she did not die, she would be stained with blood from the current situation. Now that she was suspected of murder, and there was no reasonable evidence to prove her innocence, she did not know if Hua Jin's testimony could save her any leeway. Chapter 2005. However, the disdain on her had not been removed, and she was still on bail pending trial. Yin Shirshir was a little worried. If the news were to spread, the media would not know how to publicize this matter. Those unscrupulous reporters who knew how to distort the story. What about Muyaja? He had clearly promised to fly to Sea City together, but for some reason, he did not show up. This was probably Song Inya's doing. What a good plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became. After all, Song Inya had long wanted to get rid of her. Yin Shirshir had always been wary of her, but she did not expect her to be so ruthless. Even though they could not be sure if Song Inya was the one behind all this, she was still the prime suspect. Other than her, she could not think of a second person. Still, what was the matter with that text message? She still could not think of a reasonable explanation. Could it be that someone had hacked Qin Zhou's phone IP and sent the text message, then quickly erased the data? She had removed something on this level before. If it was a skilled hacker, it would be easy for them to do such a thing. Had it not been reported on the internet before? The more Yun Shirshir thought about it, the more her head hurt. She gently knitted her brows, exhausted. She had not slept well last night, and after going through a series of events, she was exhausted. Hua Jin's heart ached when he saw her tired look. He gently caressed her face. Shirshir, do you want to sleep for a while? You don't look good. Yun Shirshir shook her head. I'm not tired. I'll accompany you. She looked up at Hua Jin and smiled. Today, thank you. If not for you, I really don't know what would have happened. Why are you thanking me? Any man would have done the same. Hua Jin did not think much of it. He did not think that this was an earth-shattering thing. I still have to thank you because you got hurt because of me. Even though Hua Jin appeared nonchalant about it, she still felt very guilty. If you say that again, I'll get angry. After a pause, Hua Jin smiled gently. If I had been with you, this wouldn't have happened. I was careless and didn't expect her to have a weapon. Didn't you think that you might die? When Hua Jin heard this, he was stunned for a moment, but then he said mockingly, I'm not even afraid of living. Why would I be afraid of death? He had experienced a life that was crueler than death. Death was nothing to be afraid of. What do you mean? Nothing. Hua Jin shook his head and didn't say anything else. Sure, why are you so stupid? Who would ask you to go to the rooftop in the middle of the night? It's obviously a trap. I can't believe you went there so eagerly. I didn't think that much. Big-chested but brainless. When Yin Shirshir heard this, she immediately became angry. What did you say? Hua Jin was amused by her and laughed out loud. Nothing. I was just joking. What? It's not funny at all. Yin Shirshir sulked. Hua Jin immediately begged for mercy. Okay, don't be angry. I said the wrong thing. There was a moment of silence in the ward. Only the beeping sound of the machine could be heard. Yin Shirshir suddenly broke the silence and asked carefully, Actually, what you told me about your background You weren't joking with me, right? Hmm? Chapter 2006. Yin Shirshir suddenly asked the question that was bothering her as she looked at him quizzically. Hua Jin was stunned. In an instant, his face turned ashen. Yin Shirshir was at a loss for what to do when she saw his face turn ugly. She did not know what she had said that had stabbed him. It's probably because you're too close to me and something bad will happen. Hua Jin lowered his eyelashes in disappointment. He bit his lip and said, maybe. I'm too selfish and didn't care about this. But he looked up and said seriously, do you know? I like being with you. A look of surprise appeared in Yun Shirshir's eyes. Don't misunderstand. I don't mean anything else. I said that I like being with you because you give me the warmth of a family. As Hua Jin spoke, he smiled slightly, but his tone was extremely lonely. I'm very greedy for this warmth because this warmth is unprecedented. So, Hua Jin. There was a hint of bitterness in Hua Jin's smile as he said seriously, maybe you should keep a distance from me. At least, before I cut ties with that woman. That woman? Could that woman be the sugar daddy behind Hua Jin that Mushi had mentioned to her before? Hua Jin glanced at Yin Shirshir and saw through her thoughts. He was extremely meticulous, more so than ordinary men. Hence, he quickly realized what Yin Shirshir was suspecting. I know that there are too many rumors about me in the industry. Some are groundless, but some are the truth. Yin Shirshir looked at him with a deep gaze. The background I told you before is all real. It's not a joke, but I'm afraid that if you know about my past, you'll think that I'm dirty. Hua Jin shrunk his shoulders helplessly. His bloodless lips were dry and cracked like the dry earth. How can that be? Yin Shirshir smiled. I don't think you're dirty. The past is the past. Who doesn't have a past? Really? Hua Jin's eyes shone with surprise and joy. In an instant, there was a hint of anger on his face. You really won't find me dirty? Yes. Hua Jin scrutinized her expression. Seeing the sincerity and seriousness in her eyes, he sighed. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you. All right. The truth was that Hua Jin's father had sold him to a man with an extraordinary background when he was at his wit's end. This man was very powerful and famous in the financial circle. He had invested in many fields, such as the internet, entertainment media, real estate. The entertainment company he controlled was only a small part of his business. The man took a fancy to him and proposed to use him to pay off the debt. Hua Jin's father agreed. The next few years were ones that Hua Jin could not bear to look back on. From being young and ignorant to later being cold and sophisticated, it was all thanks to this man. He still remembered that one time, a man took him to attend a huge private banquet. The host of the banquet had booked an entire island for half a month of revelry. Young models, drugs, and playing very fiercely. That man threw him into the circle and said that he could play with him however he wanted. During that half a month, he was ravaged beyond recognition. Chapter 2007. It was said that she died on the spot because of her drug addiction. That banquet was filled with extravagance. It was like the wine pools and meat forests of ancient times. Depth bombs, Russian roulette, there was nothing that could not be done. He watched helplessly as a group of women wearing blindfolds formed a circle with their but sticking out. When the music started, they let the men play with them. Whoever vented first had to drink as punishment. As for the so-called depth bombs, it was even more unbearable to watch. Of course, in their circle, it was not worth mentioning to play with a few young models. It was something that could be settled with a little money. Some of the young models did not know that they played so hard. They regretted it as soon as they stepped in. But since they were here, there was no reason to retreat. They forced themselves on her and did it forcefully. After that banquet, Hua Jin became addicted to drugs. He spent a few months recuperating. The man did not care about him. In order to make a living, he had to be sent to the bar. Later, the man signed a contract with him and packaged him. He was determined to turn him into a costume idol, probably because he saw him as a money tree, or maybe because he was tired of him. The man did not touch him after that. Half a year after his debut, he met the woman called Xiaoya. In fact, Hua Jin did not know the full name of this woman. He only knew that she had an extraordinary background. He heard that she was related to the Zhongtan. Her family was prominent, and the group behind her could be said to be an astonishingly powerful family. The appearance of this woman, in a sense, saved him from the dark circle. However, in another sense, he was trapped in a cage like a canary and could not be coveted by anyone. She liked him very much. Hua Jin thought that it was probably his beautiful appearance that attracted her. Or maybe it was his sweet words that made her addicted. Until now, any female star who got close to him or wanted to use his fame to create hype had been banned by her. To her, banning was just a matter of a sentence. But for those female celebrities, it was apocalyptic. From then on, any female star who saw him would avoid him as if he was a monster. Even though they were on the same set, she couldn't wait to be separated from him by a galaxy. Hua Jin glanced at her cautiously and gave a self-deprecating laugh. Isn't it funny? I'm like a commodity. To put it bluntly, even I feel that my body is extremely dirty. Don't say that. When Yin Shishir heard this, her mood was extremely complicated. Heartache, shock, heartache, all sorts of emotions welled up in his heart. It turned out that what he said that day was not a joke at all. How he had opened his wound and shown it to her. How he had smiled lightly and said, I was just joking with you. Will you hate me? Hua Jin was terrified. He didn't want to say these things. These scars had been compressed for many years and had long festered. But he just wanted to let her know that he was willing to open up his past and show it to her. However, what he was even more afraid of was that after saying all this, what he was met with was her avoidance and avoidance. Yin Shishir shook her head. She sympathized with him and her heart ached for him. But she didn't think that he was as dirty as he said. The dirtiest thing was no one's heart, wasn't it? Chapter 2008. Have you never thought of leaving this industry? Yes, I have. Hua Jin said honestly. Then why I can't escape? Hua Jin lowered his head and closed his eyes. He seemed to be disappointed and helpless. I can't escape. How can that be? Yin Shishir did not think so. She stared at Hua Jin's lonely expression and felt sorry for him. She wanted to say something, but Hua Jin cut her off. Sure, you don't understand this industry at all. It's materialistic and indulgent. Since ancient times, people in our line of work have been called entertainers and have always been reduced to playthings in the hands of the rich and powerful. Otherwise, don't step into this industry. Once you step into it, you can only climb up and there's no way out. That is, unless you have a very powerful financial backer behind you to protect you. But you're different. Acting is your pastime. You don't make a living out of it. Moreover, you have the Mu group behind you. You don't have to worry about anyone attacking you. Hua Jin suddenly smiled, but his eyes were full of bitterness. Sure. Do you know how many people I've offended all these years? If I leave this protection, I'll definitely be skinned alive by those people. Originally, I wasn't afraid, but now I want to survive. Yin Shishir was even more confused. From Hua Jin's explanation, Yin Shishir could vaguely sense that the backer behind him was very powerful. She also realized that Hua Jin was now in a dangerous situation and was in a dilemma. Other than his backer, no one could protect him. Hua Jin said casually, Actually, I'm tired of the entertainment industry. I'm tired of the hypocrisy and scheming. I'm also tired of constantly changing my mask to cater to anyone. That's why I'm so envious of you. Yin Shishir frowned and looked at him. Do you want to leave the entertainment industry? If you want to leave, I'll think of a way. Hua Jin was stunned. You'll think of a way? Yes, I will think of a way to protect you. Hua Jin was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, he shook his head and said helplessly, Sure, don't joke around. Don't make trouble for yourself. I've never thought of it as a problem. Yin Shishir said seriously, Hua Jin, if you really want to leave, I'll help you. Hua Jin gently nodded. However, he did not really believe that Yin Shishir had a way to get him out of this circle. However, he accepted her kind intentions. Airport. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when the plane landed. Last night's flight was supposed to take off at 7 o'clock. However, due to the weather, a large number of flights were delayed, and the warning was upgraded to orange. Private jets couldn't even start flights. Generally speaking, private jets couldn't fly whenever they wanted. If they had a flight plan, they had to submit an application to the airport's air traffic control a week in advance. and the flight would take place a week later. Due to the weather and many other dangerous factors, Min Yu's emergency flight was rejected. He couldn't book a first-class ticket. Hence, a certain man who had always traveled first class had to experience life in the economy class. Min Yu suggested that if the flight took off at 2 o'clock in the morning, it would be at least 6 o'clock in the morning when it landed in Sea City. Since that was the case, he might as well wait for Yun Shishir's flight in the capital. Mu Yaja rejected him coldly. He was worried. Chapter 2009. The plane finally took off at 2:50 a.m. He turned on his phone and received a long text message from Qin Zhou. It was a short and concise report of what had happened. He immediately dialed Qin Zhou's number. The phone rang for a while before it was picked up. Qin Zhou's surprised voice came through the phone. "Boss." Qin Zhou sounded as if he had seen a ghost. He did not expect Mu Yaja to arrive in Sea City overnight. He thought that Mu Yaja would never come to Sea City again. "Boss, why are you in Sea City? Where's she?" She's at the hospital." "Which hospital?" Qin Zhou reported the address. Mu Yaja was about to hang up the phone when Qin Zhou suddenly said anxiously, "Boss, is it convenient for you to come over now? I'm at the police station." "What's wrong?" "Don't worry about Shishir for now. She only suffered some superficial injuries. I've sent people to take care of her. However, there's a small matter here. I hope you can come over and take care of it." "Take care of it yourself." "I want to, but if I had such authority, why would I bother you?" Mu Yaja frowned and took it seriously. "What is it?" Half an hour later, Mu Yaja appeared at the police station. When Qin Zhou saw him, he immediately stood up excitedly and rushed to him. "Boss, you're here." "Yeah." Mu Yaja looked a little fatigued. He had barely closed his eyes during the entire night's journey. A normal person would not be able to take it. Even with his amazing stamina, he could not withstand this fatigue. The weariness on his face was heart-wrenching. He seemed to have never shown such a tired expression before. Qin Zhou also noticed the tiredness on his face. He was a little surprised. "Boss, you look tired. Do you want to rest for a while? Tell me, what's the matter?" Mu Yaja ignored his kindness and went straight to the point. Qin Zhou looked at Min Yu, who was standing beside him, with a complicated expression. He pursed his lips helplessly and said, "Mu Wanru is dead." "Mu Wanru?" Mu Yaja was stunned for a few seconds. "How did she die?" Qin Zhou summarized what had happened that night. "Right now, the police are suspecting that Shishir is Mu Wanru's murderer. Looking at the current situation, all sorts of evidence are against Shishir's innocence. The evidence collected from the crime scene is also unable to prove her innocence. I've already paid bail, but based on the current situation, I'm afraid I'll be summoned by the police for interrogation at any time." "Why is Mu Wanru in Sea City?" Min Yu questioned. "Isn't she being held captive in the hospital?" "I don't know." Qin Zhou looked confused. A sharp glint appeared in Mu Yaja's eyes as he asked suspiciously, "Are you sure it's him?" The body was placed in the morgue. Even though the person fell from a high altitude and the body was severely deformed, it was still recognizable. Mu Yaja ordered, "Min Yu, send someone to check the situation at the hospital." "Boss, you're saying, how can a lunatic escape for the hospital? Unless, of course, someone let her out." Mu Yaja's face turned frosty. If that was the case, it would be a lot more complicated. Given how crazy Mu Wanru was, how was it possible for her to escape from the mental hospital without a clear mind? Chapter 2010. He did not suspect that Mu Wanru was pretending to be crazy. No one could be that good at acting. Moreover, even if she was pretending to be crazy, she did not have the ability to investigate Yin Shishir's every move. She even knew her schedule like the back of her hand. The most difficult problem now is that the police may summon Shishir at any time. She may also face a 24-hour interrogation. "Didn't you pay the bail money?" "It's useless." Mu Yaja frowned. "It's useless?" "I've used all the power and connections I can think of, but I don't know why. It's as if they're determined to go against Shishir. Before we get any evidence, Shishir is still listed as a suspect." "How's the autopsy?" Before Qin Zhou could answer, a police officer with the rank of a sergeant suddenly walked out of the interrogation room. Behind him were the hotel manager and a few waiters. He glanced at Mu Yaja and his gaze tightened. Seeing that he was talking to Qin Zhou, he questioned sternly, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Minyu, who was standing beside him, saw that he was not friendly and stepped forward to reprimand him. "Who are you?" Muyaja stopped him. Minyu understood what he meant and immediately stepped back. The police officer glanced at Minyu and snorted. "Don't think that you can be so presumptuous here, just because you have some power. This is a serious place, so please correct your attitude and don't show off your strength." He obviously did not know the identity of the man in front of him. If he did, he probably would not be so arrogant. The police officers in the police station who had some experience all spoke with a bit of an accent. When they spoke, they pretended to be pretentious and deliberately mystifying. Muyaja said slowly, "I'm Yun Shirshi's husband." "Oh, that's great. You should cooperate with us and take a statement." Then, the police officer pointed at Qin Zhou and asked, "Where is Yun Shirshir? Tell her to come to the police station quickly. We need to ask her some questions." Qin Zhou frowned, somewhat displeased with his attitude. Muyaja continued, "If you have any questions, you can ask me directly." The police officer looked him up and down, then pointed to the interrogation room and ordered, "Go sit there first." Minyu thought to himself, "This officer is really arrogant and unreasonable. I wonder who gave him the right to do so. Aren't you afraid of offending people with your words?" While he was complaining, Muyaja had already strode into the interrogation room. He wanted to follow, but was stopped by the police officer. "Wait here." As he spoke, the police officer handed over a few tasks and entered the interrogation room. The two men sat facing each other. Muyaja sat elegantly on the chair with his legs slightly crossed. His aura was like that of an emperor, which made the already small interrogation room seem even more cramped. "What's his name?" "Asked you what your name is." Muyaja glanced at him. "Muyaja," the police officer asked as he registered. "What's your relationship with the suspect?" "Suspect?" Muyaja's cold and indifferent eyes slowly narrowed, emitting a dangerous glint. "The suspect is Yun Shirshir. What's your relationship with her?" "She's not guilty." The police officer was stunned. Chapter 2011. She killed someone. Did you see it with your own eyes? No. Then why did you convict her? She hasn't been convicted yet. She's just a suspect on bail. The police officer spoke again. Whether or not she killed someone, whether or not she's guilty, it's not up to you to decide. She's already been released on bail. According to the rules and regulations of the police station, suspects who have been released on bail have to be summoned by the police at any time. Rules and regulations were rules. However, there is no such thing as being released on bail 1 second and being summoned to the police station the next second for interrogation. Could it be that someone was making things difficult for her? Muyaja sneered. "You're talking to me about rules and regulations? Rules and regulations are rules. No one could defy them. You're a police officer. Who gave you such authority?" The police officer looked up at him and warned, "Mr. Mu, the law is strict. Please cooperate with the investigation." Muyaja's lips curled into a sneer. His gaze fell on the police officer as he casually remarked, "What a good example of the authority of the law." He suddenly lowered his gaze and tugged at his tie gently. He then unbuttoned his sleeves. The evil smile on his lips inexplicably made people feel awe. The police officer looked at him quietly, only to see him suddenly stand up straight, stride forward, and slowly walk in front of him. He raised his leg and kicked the table in front of him. He was insufferably arrogant and had no scruples about his status. The table quickly fell towards the police officer. The police officer was caught off guard and was not prepared at all. He fell to the ground together with the table. His leg was crushed by the table, and he grimaced in pain. The table in the interrogation room was very heavy. An ordinary man would not be able to withstand it when it was on top of a person. Muyaja's face was gloomy. His deep black eyes flashed with a sharp glint. He landed on the person on the ground and put his hands in his trouser pockets. He lifted his leg and suddenly stepped on the table. Under the force, the table fell heavily on his body. "Ah!" The police officer screamed in pain. He felt that his legs were about to break under this kick. "Who allowed you to call my wife a suspect? Who gave you such a right?" "You," the police officer widened his eyes in shock. It was hard to imagine that this man dared to be so presumptuous in the police station. You're assaulting a police officer. Where's the law? Law? Muyaja looked down at him coldly. I don't have much patience, so listen carefully. Muyaja said coldly. I was the one who killed him. If you have the ability, you can deal with me. Several police officers outside the door heard the commotion and immediately rushed in. When they saw the situation, they were shocked. Qinzhou and Minyu also rushed over. They were shocked when they saw this soul-stirring scene. She didn't know what had made her boss so angry that he actually started a fight in the police station. It had never happened before. Bastard, what are you trying to do? What kind of place is this? How dare you rebel? When a police officer saw this, he immediately rushed forward to take him down. Muyaja casually grabbed him and restrained him. How many skills could the people in the police station have? But Muyaja was different. He had trained in the military. Every move he made was from actual combat. These guys could not compare to him. Chapter 2012. About 10 minutes later, in the bureau chief's office. The old bureau chief carefully poured tea and looked at the cold-looking man sitting on the sofa. He was on tenterhooks, fearing that he might have missed something. It's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding. My subordinates didn't do their job properly and caused you to be alarmed. I'm really ashamed. No one would believe that the young mistress of the Mu family would sacrifice her bright future for the sake of killing someone who had nothing to do with it. This obviously doesn't make sense. Muyaja snorted coldly and ignored the tea that the bureau chief offered him. He said coldly, investigate your subordinates properly. In this case, he's like a mad dog biting onto an innocent person. It's obvious that he has received some kind of favor. Yes, I'll definitely investigate this thoroughly. However, I hope you won't take this matter to heart, Chairman Mu. You're such a big shot and magnanimous person. You can't make things difficult for me over such a small matter. If I knew it was you, I wouldn't have dared to make things difficult for you. The office door opened. The old bureau chief thanked him profusely and invited him out. The few police officers standing outside the door looked at each other and then at the old bureau chief, who was nodding and bowing humbly. They were all frightened. It turned out that this man had such a powerful background that the old bureau chief could lower himself to cater to him. No wonder he had a fierce and threatening aura. It seemed that he was not a simple person. This time, they were blind and had offended someone they shouldn't have. When the old bureau chief saw them, he glared at them fiercely. He turned his head and put on a fawning look again. He rubbed his hands and asked carefully, Chairman Mu, do you want to stay for a while longer? No, I have something to do. Of course. Chairman Mu, you're a busy man. I'm really sorry to have caused you trouble in the midst of your busy schedule. Let me see you out. Forget it. Muyaja was annoyed when he saw him. He turned around and called Minyu and Qinzhou to leave the police station. Finally, the old director wiped the cold sweat on his forehead with a handkerchief and turned around, regaining his dignified appearance. Who gave you the guts to interrogate this high lord? A loud shout shook the entire room. Everyone looked at each other and lowered their heads guiltily. Who is in charge of this case? Stand out. A new police officer stepped forward obediently. Do you know who you have offended? Didn't you check his background before the interrogation? I was just following orders. On whose orders? Sheriff Wu. The old bureau chief narrowed his eyes. Where is he? His leg was injured. He was sent to the hospital. Tell him to look for me later. I have something to ask him. Understood. In the car. With a frosty expression, Muyaja ordered his assistant, send someone to the Song's residence to restrain Song Enya. After returning to the capital, investigate the ins and outs of this matter. Yes, I understand. Minyu observed his expression and asked, Boss, do you suspect, other than the Songs, no one else in the capital has such great capabilities? Even if there is, they don't have the motive. He thought about it. Chapter 2013. Come to think of it, her so-called suicide was just to divert his attention. How ruthless. A woman's heart was the most vicious. She was the embodiment of it all. She actually used suicide as a way to attract his attention. Most women would at most be ruthless to others. However, she could even do it to herself. It was truly chilling. Minyu immediately sent people to the hospital and the Song family to capture Song Enya's every move and await her punishment. By the time they reached the hospital, the sky was already slightly cold. Muyaja walked to the door of the ward. As soon as he pushed it open, he saw Yun Shirshir lying by the bed, fast asleep. However, even though she was asleep, her hands were still tightly clasped with Hua Jin's. Hua Jin's eyes were originally closed when he was suddenly awakened by Mu Yaja's aggressive movements. He opened his eyes abruptly and saw a tall and handsome man with black hair in a suit appear at the door of the ward. Mu Yaja walked into the ward. His sharp gaze suddenly fell on Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin's tightly clasped hands. His gaze suddenly deepened. It was obvious that he was displeased by their intimacy. Yun Shirshir, however, did not notice it at all. Perhaps she was really tired, so her pajamas were so deep that she did not wake up even though there was a huge commotion. Muyaja walked over. Every step he took was mixed with a thunderous aura. Hua Jin could not help but be intimidated by his cold aura. While he was stunned, he saw him standing by the bed with his gaze still fixed on their tightly clasped hands. His gaze was sharp. Hua Jin was shocked by his aura and broke out in a cold sweat. "You? What are you doing? Let go." It was just 2 words, but his tone was commanding and did not allow for any objection. Not only did Hua Jin not let go, but he also tightened his grip on her hand. This man's vicious aura was too terrifying. He was like a lion protecting its territory, aggressive and aggressive. "What are you doing?" Muyaja walked over and grabbed his hand, forcefully pulling it away from Yun Shirshir's. Hua Jin cried out in pain. The strength in his hands was so terrifying that he couldn't struggle at all. In the next second, he saw him trying to pick up Yun Shirshir. In his panic, he shouted, "Don't touch her!" He subconsciously reached out to stop her. Muyaja didn't even look at him as he waved his hand away. Scram! Hua Jin was flung to the side. In his violent movements, he accidentally pulled on his wound. His face turned pale from the pain. He clenched his teeth and sucked in a breath of cold air. So painful. The wound had just been stitched up, so it was still very fragile. Muyaja waved his hand roughly, but he could clearly feel the wound tearing open. Soon, there was a smear of dark red blood on the gauze, which kept seeping out. Yin Shirshir was startled awake by the argument between the two. She looked up and saw Hua Jin covering his wound, frowning as he fell to the side. She immediately went forward to support him. Just as she got up, she realized that there was a man with a terrifying aura standing beside her. She turned around and saw that it was him. Why is it you?" Muyaja asked coldly. "Why can't it be me?" Yin Shirshir looked deeply into his cold eyes, and her tone instantly turned cold. "What are you doing here?" Those 5 cold words were extremely distant and indifferent. When she thought of him breaking the contract, she was furious. Muyaja was slightly angered by those 5 cold words. Chapter 2014. His voice was cold, and the chill seeped in her bones, making her shudder. Yin Shirshir didn't back off. Instead, she looked up and stared back at him coldly. Without any hesitation, she said aggressively, "Why should I want you to come?" Muyaja looked at her with a gloomy gaze. "Did I disturb you when I came?" As he said that, his gaze fell on Hua Jin with deep meaning. Thinking about how intimately the two of them were when he pushed the door open and walked in, he felt an inexplicable anger and frustration. He hated it when she was with other men. Moreover, they were holding hands so intimately. She stayed by the bed, and even though they were asleep, their hands were still tightly intertwined. How could he not be angry? The disgust and suspicion in his eyes pierced Yun Shirshir's heart. At that moment, the wound that had already healed started to bleed again. What was he disgusted with? Disgusted with Hua Jin? Then, what was he suspecting? Was he suspecting that she and Hua Jin would be having an affair when he wasn't around? What did he mean by, "Did I disturb you"? Didn't this man sometimes feel that his words were cruel and hurtful? Yin Shirshir was so angry that she was trembling all over. In the end, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. She stood up abruptly and pushed him out of the door, ignoring the abrasions on her hands. "Get lost. Muyaja was caught off guard and was pushed hard by her, causing him to stumble backward. When he realized what she had said, he looked up in disbelief and stared at her coldly. However, he sneered angrily. "Get lost." Yin Shirshir met his gaze fearlessly, but her voice was chilly. "Yes, get lost. I don't want to see you." Qin Zhou and Minyu rushed over, but didn't expect to see this scene. Qin Zhou and Minyu looked at each other as they stared at each other. Clearly, they did not expect such a situation. Seeing that he was pushed away, the man deeply frowned. Deep, handsome eyes fell on her face. There was scrutiny, there was anger. "What do you mean?" Muyaja's heart was filled with anger. He grabbed her hand tightly, and his chest was filled with jealousy. "You dare to chase me away for a man?" His hands were extremely strong. Yin Shirshir was hurt by him all of a sudden. She bit her lip in pain and looked at him with teary eyes, but there was a hint of wanting to say something. What did she mean by chasing him away for a man? Was that the reason? It was simply indescribable. This man's ability to twist people's words was amazing. When Huajin saw this, he was also furious. He sat up abruptly and didn't care about the wound on his upper abdomen. He glared at Muyaja and complained, "Muyaja, if you're still a man, please don't treat her so roughly." Muyaja glanced at him coldly from the corner of his eye. "You have no right to speak here." "Why not?" Huajin didn't know where he got the courage from. His eyes were red as he spoke up for Yin Shirshir. Do you know that Shirshir almost lost her life last night?" Muyaja's pupils contracted as he stared at him suspiciously. "What do you mean?" Huajin. Chapter 2015. Yin Shirshir gritted her teeth and stopped him. Huajin didn't listen to her and continued. "As her man, you should protect her. Trust her. But you can't even protect her. What right do you have to be her man? What right do you have to be angry at her? Shirshir is a good girl. If you don't cherish her, please don't trample on her." Huajin, stop talking. Yin Shirshir swatted his hand away, but her heart couldn't help but turn cold. Qin Zhou heard this and immediately went forward. "Boss, calm down. There's nothing that can't be explained clearly. There's no need to be so angry." Huajin gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He sneered and said, "Muyaja, I know that you have great power and influence. As the business tycoon in Beijing, the Mu family is a big business and has a deep-rooted position. If I offend you, you can ban me with just one word. But do you think I'm afraid of you? I'll look down on you instead. If you can't even protect the woman you love, what's the point of having great power and influence?" She almost lost her life tonight. Muyaja regained his composure and said coldly, "What do you mean by that?" "I don't know. I only know that last night, Shirshir was tricked by a text message to go to the rooftop on the 28th floor. In the end, a crazy woman came out of nowhere and wanted to kill her. Do you know that the woman dragged her down from the 28th floor? If it weren't for Shirshir's quick reflexes to grab hold of the pipe hanging outside the building, perhaps what you're seeing now is just a cold corpse." Muyaja was slightly stunned. "Perhaps what you're seeing now is just a cold corpse." These words really shocked him. Yin Shirshir held her hand that was hurting from his grip and stood aside. She turned her face away and didn't make a sound, but her face was already wet with tears. She had never thought of complaining about Muyaja breaking his promise last night. But when she saw the suspicion in his eyes, her heart turned cold. She was frightened. After all, she was a woman. When she saw him, she hoped that he would hold her in his arms and comfort her gently. But not only did that not happen, he even doubted her. Could it be that she still needed to painstakingly explain to him? There's no need for that. If they trusted him, why would they doubt him? If he had doubts, there was no need to explain. He didn't trust her enough. Yin Shirshir firmly believed in this conclusion. Is what he said true? Muyaja asked her. When he was at the police station, he didn't know about this at all. Even Qin Zhou didn't know this detail. He only knew that Yin Shirshir was in danger, but he didn't know that she was only one step away from death. Yin Shirshir's lips curled into a cold smirk as she slowly looked at him and casually asked, "Does it matter to you whether it's true or not? How could it not be important?" He had almost lost her. How could it not be important? Muyaja knew that the woman in front of him was angry with him. It was probably because he didn't attend the awards ceremony with her last night. Therefore, she was angry. She was angry that he had failed to keep his promise. As he thought of this, he felt that it was reasonable for this little thing to be a little emotional. Chapter 2016. Thus, he tugged on her sleeve and lowered his noble head. His pair of clear and cold eyes floated with a hint of apology, as if he was taking a step back. He lowered his voice and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stood you up. I shouldn't have put you in such a dangerous situation. Do you think I need your apology?" If it was any other day, this little woman would definitely be amused by his helpless appearance and laugh. However, Yin Shishir was not moved at all when she heard his apology. In fact, the coldness in her eyes was so gloomy that it was about to stab him. Is an apology enough? Is an apology enough to make up for everything? Muyaja asked in a low voice. What do you want? What do I want? Yin Shishir stared at him with widened eyes. She was so angry that she laughed. Muyaja, why do you have to be so arrogant even when you're apologizing? Muyaja was speechless for a moment. This woman was so eloquent. He was not good at expressing himself, let alone sweet-talking her. Hence, he could not refute her. He clearly did not mean it that way. So, did she have to twist his words so much? Muyaja was at a loss for words. Yin Shishir sized him up. Her eyes regained their calm as she said coldly, "Attending the film festival with me is probably not as important as Song Enya, right?" He did not know if she was deliberately trying to provoke him or if she was really trying to guess him. However, just as he was about to deny it, Muyaja suddenly reacted to her words and was stunned. How did she know that he had stood her up because of Song Enya? For a moment, his eyes were filled with doubts. What do you mean? What do you mean? I mean it literally. Don't you understand? How did she know? How did she know about Song Enya? Muyaja suddenly realized something. Could it be that Song Enya had told her, or was she deliberately using this matter to provoke her? *M in it. Yin Shishir sneered and said expressionlessly, "You didn't pick up the phone because you were afraid that I would be angry if I found out, right?" Muyaja was silent for a long time before he admitted bluntly, "Yes." Yin Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his affirmation. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air as her eyes turned moist. He clearly knew that she would be angry if she heard about this matter. However, he still went to the film festival without hesitation. She left him behind to accompany Song Enya. For the time being, she would not speculate on the reason behind it. Was it like what Song Enya had said, or was there another reason? The fact that he had abandoned his promise with her and went to Song Enya's side was an undeniable fact. How ridiculous! Yin Shishir gritted her teeth and suppressed the bitterness in her heart. Every word she uttered was shaky. If you're really afraid that I'll be angry, then why did you do it? You clearly know how much I hate her. But one phone call from her and you still went. You went without a care for anything. You even canceled your promise with me and didn't even give me a reply. I was so worried that something had happened to you. In the end, I didn't expect you to break our promise because of Song Enya. What am I? Muyaja, what am I? Don't tell me you don't care about your agreement with me at all. No. Then what is it? Tell me. Answer me. She was so aggressive that he had no way to retreat. Chapter 2017. Yin Shishir burst out laughing. Am I being unreasonable? Oh, so that's how it is. How did you find out about this? Muyaja asked in a deep voice. Yin Shishir chuckled when she heard that. So, you're still trying to hide it from me. It's not what you think. A look of fatigue appeared in Muyaja's eyes. He shut them tightly and said weakly, "Don't let your imagination run wild. Since you've already done it, why are you afraid that I'll let my imagination run wild? What did I do?" Muyaja felt that she was a little unreasonable. He clearly did not do anything, yet he was being questioned like this. He really felt that he could not defend himself. Yin Shishir said coldly, "The second before I registered, Song Enya called and flaunted her power to me. What is this? Is this a provocation? Now, you're acting all innocent. Who are you trying to put on an act for?" Song Enya called me? Muyaja's brows sank. Without thinking, he knew that Song Enya had called Yin Shishir and said something nasty. She was probably using this opportunity to drive a wedge between them. However, he really did not expect this. He thought that Song Inya had really slit her wrist and went to the hospital to visit her out of goodwill. He did not expect that she had deliberately hurt herself to gain his sympathy and pity. Her motive was terrible. However, she said that he was putting on an act? Muyaja's face sank at once. No one had ever dared to say such things in front of him. She was the first. Back then, Jiang Qiming had repeatedly pleaded with him, so he felt a little sorry for Song Inya. He thought that the latter was really seeking death, so he pushed back his flight in the afternoon and rushed to the hospital to take a look before flying directly to Sea City. Back then, when he called Qin Zhou and instructed him to fly to Sea City with Yin Shishir, it was to ensure her safety. However, Qin Zhou misunderstood him. He thought that he was not going, so he told Yin Shishir the same thing. But in reality, it wasn't that he wasn't going. He had merely pushed back his flight and planned to book a flight to Sea City immediately after visiting his niece. However, there were two accidents. One exception was Song Inya. The other one was that the plane tickets had been booked and the next flight was at 7 p.m. However, he knew that the flight would be delayed, so there was no need for him to make the trip. Minyu also tried to persuade him. Perhaps, by the time he arrived, it would already be early in the morning. So, there was no point in going to Sea City. He missed her and was afraid that she would be disappointed, so he still insisted on flying over. The reason why he didn't pick up her call was because he was in a hurry to go to the hospital and didn't bring his phone with him. When he returned to the company and saw the missed calls, he didn't know how to explain it, so he didn't reply immediately. He didn't know how to lie, he didn't know how to flatter, and he didn't know how to smooth things over. However, if he were to tell the truth directly over the phone, he felt that it was inappropriate. He was afraid that she would let her imagination run wild and suspect something. She was extremely sensitive and would easily let her imagination run wild. He was afraid that she would think too much, so he didn't pick up the call. Hence, he thought that he might as well not say anything over the phone. If she asked about it when they arrived in Sea City, he could explain it clearly in person. What happened next, though? Chapter 2018. Little did he know that right after he left the hospital, Song Inya had made a provocative call to Yin Shishir in high spirits. He did not know what she had said over the phone, but it was nothing more than that to sow discord between them. As for what happened later, he did not have the ability to predict the future, so he could not foresee anything that would happen in the next second. How could he have imagined that Song Inya would be so ruthless as to go all out to get rid of Yin Shishir? Since she dared to mess around right under his nose, he would not be soft-hearted. Song Inya's side was easy to deal with. However, this woman used this to stop him. What could happen between him and Song Inya? Song Inya was related to him by blood. She was his cousin. According to seniority, she was his niece. He had to be crazy to have any thoughts about Song Inya. Before Yin Shishir appeared, he had been getting along with her rather harmoniously. However, some things that happened later made him extremely disappointed in Song Inya. Hence, they gradually drifted apart. However, it was impossible for him to say that he did not have any feelings for a sister that he had doted on since she was young. Compared to more than 10 years of friendship, she was his most beloved sister. If it were not for Song Inya, he would not have been able to walk out of the trauma of losing his mother. He still had to care about this bit of friendship. He was a coal man to the core, but most of the time, he was not so heartless. However, it was precisely this compassion that was used by the other party. He admitted defeat and felt that he was a good-for-nothing to have been set up in such a way. He was really a good-for-nothing. He was indignant, helpless, and a little angry. The last bit of affection he had for Song Inya was completely gone. However, he was indignant that she would judge him like this. Do you really understand the meaning of putting yourself in someone else's shoes? Can you give me a reasonable explanation? She's in the hospital. Muyaja forced himself to calm down and replied calmly. Her mother knelt down and begged me to see her. What happened to her? She cut her wrist. Cut her wrist. Yin Shishir smiled. Do you believe her? Muyaja was silent for a moment. So, you broke your promise with me for Song Inya. Muyaja was completely speechless. Even a few words of explanation seemed powerless. He suddenly turned around and furrowed his brows tiredly. He looked at her deeply and said nothing as he strode out of the ward. Boss, Chairman Mu. Qin Zhou and Minyu looked at each other as they watched him leave. Minyu patted Qin Zhou's shoulder gently and instructed, I'll go check on the boss first. I'll leave young madam to you. Take good care of her. Okay. Minyu immediately chased after Mu Yaja and left. Yin Shishir watched as Mu Yaja left. As if she had lost all her strength, she fell on the bed in a daze. Her eyes were blank and her shoulders drooped helplessly. She reached out her hands and slowly held her face as she sobbed silently. Seeing this, Qin Zhou could not bear to see her like this. As a bystander, it was difficult for him to judge who was at fault in this matter. However, at the end of the day, the two cared too much about each other and loved each other to the core. It was just that some things still needed to be worn in and could not be explained clearly. Chapter 2019. However, Hua Jin beat him to it. He sat beside her and hugged her shoulders gently. Don't cry. His heart ached when he saw her crying. He felt indignant on her behalf. How could there be a man as arrogant as Mu Yaja in this world? He was insufferably arrogant and looked down on everyone else. Hua Jin hugged her, not caring that such an action would affect his wound. Even though it was painful and itchy, making his scalp tingle, at this moment compared to her tears, it seemed that all of this was not worth mentioning. He didn't like her tears. Such a pair of beautiful eyes should be more beautiful when she smiled. But now, they were red and swollen from crying. They were not beautiful at all. Hua Jin said half jokingly, half seriously, sure, don't cry. If you keep crying, I'll cry too. Before he could finish his sentence, a line of warm tears rolled down from his eyes. Yin Shishir remained motionless. She held her face as if she couldn't hear any of his comforting words. She couldn't stop her tears, and they fell down in streams. Hua Jin didn't know how to comfort her. He could only hold her helplessly and pull her into his arms. He allowed her hot tears to burn his chest in the car. Minyu sat carefully at the side. Mu Yaja propped up his chin with one hand as he looked coldly out of the window. Even though he was quiet and did not say a word, his domineering aura made the atmosphere in the car taut like a bowstring, ready to explode at any moment. Actually, Minyu really wanted to ask what his plan was. Was he going to return to the capital immediately or stay in Sea City for a few days? Looking at Yin Shishir's condition and Hua Jin's injury, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to leave in a day or two. However, there were some things that he had to deal with in the capital. Also, Minyu also felt that if his boss left without saying a word, young madam would be sad. Women were the most delicate and sensitive. A woman like young madam was very easy to coax. With a few sweet words, she would probably not be so stubborn. Although he didn't have a wife, he had dated 1 or 2 women. It was hard to guess a woman's thoughts, but it was easy to coax her. Someone like young madam was not particularly willful and unruly. She was considerate and gentle. She would lower herself to coax her a little and then stop when she was ahead. Furthermore, I don't know if I should say that. Minyu thought that if he were the young madam, he would be angry too. However, with the boss's arrogant and insufferably arrogant personality, it was rare for him to lower himself to apologize. Saying sorry was already not easy. However, when coaxing a woman, patience was the most important thing. In the inside, it was a long story. Even he was anxious when he saw it. Boss, Minyu thought about it and decided to ask about it. Seeing that Mu Yaja was still looking out the window, he asked carefully about young madam. She needs to calm down. Mu Yaja said expressionlessly, let her calm down for a while. Minyu wanted to say that women didn't need to calm down. He wasn't like a man who could quickly calm down when something happened. The more they ignored her, the more problems there would be. However, he couldn't blame his boss. His boss didn't know how to coax a woman at all. This was the problem. Chapter 2020. Is he having a cold war with me? His assistant was worried sick about this matter. Boss, you don't have the demeanor of a man in this matter. It's reasonable for young madam to be angry. Upon hearing that, Mu Yaja shot him a cold glance from the corner of his eye. He stared at the man like a predator eyeing its prey. What did you say? His cold words suppressed the indignation in his assistant's heart. He thought with teary eyes, young madam is the boss's first love. It's bad enough that he doesn't know how to coax a woman, but he's not humble enough to learn from her. Bad review. Tell me, how should I coax her? Muyaja asked calmly. She's in a fit of anger now. Every word she says is as sharp as a knife. That's because the boss didn't handle the matter well. You can't blame anyone. Muyaja's eyes turned colder as soon as he said that. The assistant obediently shut his mouth and blinked at him innocently. Are you lecturing me? No, I wouldn't dare. Someone who doesn't even have a wife has no right to say that. His assistant expressed enviously and pitifully. If I have a wife, I'll treat her like a treasure. I won't talk back to her no matter what she says. Muyaja closed his eyes and leaned his head gently on the pillow. I just feel helpless. I don't know what to do with her. Coax her, lie to her, hug her in your arms, and coax her gently like a child. Before he could finish his sentence, Minyu's phone suddenly rang. He apologized and picked up the call, only to hear a nervous voice from the other end. Song Inya is missing. What? His voice rose as he asked incredulously, What's going on? The person on the other end reported, There's no one in the hospital. She went missing last night, and her whereabouts are unknown. The Songs are also very anxious. They can't find her. We're sending people to investigate, but there's still no news. How is that possible? Where could she have gone? I don't know. Continue to investigate until you find her. Yes. After hanging up the phone, Muyaja asked suspiciously, What's missing? He vaguely heard these two words. Boss, we've received news that Song Inya has gone missing. She's nowhere to be found in the hospital, and the Songs are frantically searching for her. He's missing. Muyaja furrowed his brows, and a layer of ice formed on his face. Yes. After a pause, he continued. Although I don't have any evidence to prove it, I suspect that Song Inya has something to do with Mu Wanru's matter. I've already sent someone to the hospital to inquire about Mu Wanru. Maybe we can find out something. Muyaja was increasingly certain that Song Inya had gone missing due to a guilty conscience or some other unspeakable reason. However, a person would never disappear for no reason. There would always be some clues. He said, Book a flight back to the capital. Then what about young madam? Send someone to guard it. Yes. Minyu immediately sent someone to book the flight tickets. The car sped away. On the other end, Qin Zhou was stunned when he received the news that Mu